The metal door groaned on hinges that had witnessed 36 years of a warrior's life. Captain Marcus Aldridge stood before locker number 17 at Fort Benning, Georgia, his weathered hands resting on cool steel that held more memories than most men accumulate in twice that time. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed their familiar song in the empty changing room, casting harsh shadows across a face that had seen too much sun, too much sand, too much war. 58 years old. 36 of them spent commanding steel beasts across deserts and mountains and the kind of hellscapes that exist only in the fevered nightmares of civilians who have never heard incoming fire. Marcus Aldridge, call sign Iron, had outlasted 3 wars, 2 knees, and 1 heart that stopped beating the day his wife Sarah drove over an improvised explosive device on a supply route outside Kandahar. 3 years ago, sometimes it felt like yesterday, sometimes it felt like a lifetime. He opened the locker slowly, reverently, the way a priest might open a tabernacle. Inside hung his dress uniform, pressed and perfect, waiting for the retirement ceremony scheduled in 3 weeks. Below it, his combat boots, polished to a mirror shine by hands that had performed the ritual 10,000 times. On the shelf above, his cover, his combat infantry badge, his bronze star with V device for valor under fire. And the photographs. Marcus reached for the frame on the top shelf, his fingers trembling slightly. The arthritis in his hands had been getting worse, but he would never admit it. Tank commanders did not complain about pain. They endured. They persevered. They kept their crews alive through sheer force of will and the kind of stubborn refusal to quit that separated warriors from soldiers. The first photograph showed a younger Marcus, maybe 30 years old, standing beside an M1 Abrams tank somewhere in the Iraqi desert during the first Gulf War. The year was 1991, and the world had not yet learned to fear asymmetric warfare. Back then, enemies came in tanks. You could see them. You could kill them. The math was simple, and the victories were clean. Beside him in the photo stood a tall blond man with a Swedish flag patch on his shoulder and a grin that could light up the darkest night. Jack Strand, Viking they called him, because he looked like he had stepped out of a Norse saga, all golden hair and ice blue eyes, and the kind of fearlessness that made other men want to follow him into hell. Marcus had loved him like a brother, more than a brother. Jack had been his gunner, his right hand, the warrior he trusted with his life every single day. They had burned through the Iraqi Republican Guard together, 2 young tank commanders who believed they were invincible because they had never yet been proven wrong. Marcus set down the photograph and picked up the second frame. This one hurt worse. Sarah, his wife, captured in a moment of laughter at some forgotten barbecue, her dark hair pulled back, her smile radiant, her eyes full of the kind of light that only exists in people who have chosen to see beauty in a brutal world. She had been an army medic, tough as nails and gentle as morning rain, the kind of woman who could set a broken bone and then hold a dying soldier's hand while she whispered promises that everything would be okay, even when she knew it was a lie. She had saved Jack's life in the Gulf War, pulled shrapnel from his shoulder while under fire, her hands steady, her voice calm. That was how Marcus had met her. He had carried his wounded gunner to the aid station, and there she was, this fierce angel covered in blood and desert dust, telling him to put Jack down gently and get the hell out of her way so she could work. Marcus had fallen in love in that exact moment. They married 2 years later. She gave him 23 years of the kind of happiness that warriors do not deserve but accept anyway, grateful for every stolen moment of peace. She understood him, understood the nightmares, understood the silences, understood that some parts of him would always belong to the Brotherhood of Armor, and she never asked him to choose. And then one day she was gone. Convoy hit, IED buried in the road. She died doing what she always did, riding with her soldiers, refusing to stay safe in the rear while her medics drove into danger without her. The radio intercept haunted him still, her last words crackling with static and desperation. "Where are the Avengers? We need close defense now." The Avengers, short-range air defense systems, missiles designed to protect convoys from aerial threats. But the Avengers had been decommissioned years earlier, victims of budget cuts and Pentagon planners who believed the era of low-altitude threats had ended. Sarah's convoy had rolled out with nothing but small arms and prayers. The drone that killed her cost probably $800. a hobbyist quadcopter retrofitted with a shaped charge controlled by some insurgent teenager hiding in the hills with a laptop. Sarah and 3 of her medics died instantly. The million-dollar missile systems that might have saved them were sitting in storage depots, deemed obsolete by men who had never heard incoming fire. Marcus closed his eyes and let the grief wash over him, the way he did every morning. He had learned not to fight it. The pain was part of him now, woven into his DNA, inseparable from his identity. He was Marcus Aldridge, Iron, and he was a man who had failed to protect the people he loved most. He was about to put the photograph back when his phone buzzed. The screen showed a number he recognized. General Patricia Vance, and Director of NATO Interoperability Programs. She was supposed to be in Brussels. Why was she calling his personal line on a Thursday afternoon? Marcus answered, his voice gravelly from disuse. He had not spoken to anyone in 2 days. Aldridge. Marcus. General Vance's voice was brisk, efficient, the tone of a woman who had commanded thousands and had no patience for small talk. I need you for one last operation. Something tightened in Marcus's chest. One last operation, the words every retiring warrior both craved and feared. One more chance to matter. One more chance to prove that age had not stolen competence. One more chance to do something that justified all the years, all the scars, all the ghosts. I'm listening, he said. Sweden is deploying LVKV 9040 systems to Latvia, gun-based short-range air defense. They want our best tank commander to train their crews. 6 weeks, in and out, then you retire with full honors. Marcus frowned. The LVKV 9040, he knew the system, a 40mm autocannon mounted on a CV-90 chassis designed for point defense against low-flying threats. The kind of gun-based system that had fallen out of favor decades ago, replaced by expensive missiles that promised precision and delivered bankruptcy. Why me? He asked. I'm armor, not air defense. Because you understand gun systems, Vance replied. Because you know how to train warriors, not just technicians. And because the lead Swedish officer specifically requested you. Marcus felt something cold crawl up his spine. Who? There was a pause on the line, just long enough to tell him that Vance knew this would hurt. Major Eric Strand, Jack's son. The world tilted slightly. Marcus sat down hard on the wooden bench, his legs suddenly unsteady. Eric. Little Eric, who had been 13 years old the last time Marcus saw him, standing rigid at his father's funeral, while a Swedish honor guard folded the flag and a chaplain spoke empty words about sacrifice and service. Eric, who had watched Marcus with eyes that burned with grief and something else, something that looked uncomfortably like blame. Marcus, Vance's voice cut through the memory. You still there? Yeah, he forced the word out. I'm here. I know this is complicated, Vance said, her tone softening slightly, but Eric specifically asked for you. He needs the training. The LVKI program is critical for Baltic defense. And frankly, you need this. I need what? A reason to keep going, Vance said quietly. Sarah's been gone 3 years, Marcus. You have been dying slowly in that apartment, talking to ghosts. This is a chance to finish strong, to pass on what you know before it dies with you. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he was fine, that he did not need saving. But the lie would not come. She was right. He had been dying, just slowly, quietly. The way old warriors die when the wars finally end and they realize they have nothing left to fight for. When do I leave, he asked. Friday. You will have a team. Sergeant Major Kowalski, Lieutenant Rossi, 4 specialists. NATO will handle logistics. You just focus on keeping those Swedish crews alive. Kowalski. Tank, they called him, because the man was built like an M1 Abrams and about as subtle. He had been Marcus's loader in the Gulf War, the 3rd member of their crew alongside Jack. He was 54 now, officially retired, but still training new tankers at Fort Benning because he did not know how to exist outside the Brotherhood of Armor. Emma Rossi was younger, 29, a lieutenant who had commanded a Stryker vehicle in Afghanistan before transferring to training command. Her father had been a tanker too, killed by an IED in 2012. She had joined the army to understand him, to walk in his footsteps, to touch the world that had claimed him. I will send the briefing materials tonight, Vance continued. Marcus, I know this is hard, but Eric would not have requested you unless he was ready. Maybe this is a chance for both of you to make peace. Marcus almost laughed. Peace. He had not known peace since Jack died, and he suspected Eric had not either. But maybe Vance was right. Maybe facing each other was the only way to exorcise the ghost that haunted them both. "I will be ready," he said. "I know you will. Vance out." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silent locker room, staring at the photographs in his hands. Jack grinning beside the tank. Sarah laughing in the sunlight. Two people he had loved and lost. Two ghosts that followed him everywhere he went. He picked up the third photograph, the one he kept hidden at the back of the shelf, wrapped in an old T-shirt like a talisman against bad luck. This one showed Jack in Iraq in 2006, older and harder than the Gulf War version. His face weathered by 15 years of deployments. He wore full combat gear, and he was looking directly at the camera with an expression Marcus remembered like a knife to the heart. Determination, resignation, love. That photograph had been taken 2 hours before Jack died. Chapter 2. The Ghost. Memory is a kind of shalcinas. It ambushes you in quiet moments, drags you backward through time, forces you to relive things you would give the anything to forget. Marcus stood in the locker room with Jack's photograph in his hands, and suddenly he was not in Georgia anymore. He was in Iraq. 2006, the Anbar province, a place where the desert met urban sprawl and every shadow hid something that wanted to kill you. They had been hunting insurgents for 3 weeks. His tank platoon grinding through neighborhoods where every doorway might hide a rocket-propelled grenade and every pile of trash might conceal an IED. The kind of war that wore you down not with dramatic battles, but with constant low-level terror, the endless waiting for violence that could come from anywhere at any time. Marcus had been commanding from his M1 Abrams, Jack beside him as always. Their bond had only deepened over the years. Where Marcus was cautious and methodical, Jack was aggressive and instinctive. Where Marcus planned, Jack improvised. They balanced each other perfectly, the way old married couples learn to finish each other's sentences. The ambush came at 1400 hours on a Tuesday. Marcus's tank had been leading the patrol when the road beneath them erupted. Not a simple IED, a massive buried bomb, military-grade explosives, the kind of charge that could flip a 60-ton tank like a child's toy. The world became fire and thunder. Marcus remembered flying, weightless for a moment that lasted forever, and then slamming into something hard. Metal screamed, his crew screamed, smoke filled the crew compartment, choking, blinding, the taste of burning diesel and his own blood in his mouth. He had crawled from the wreckage on instinct, dragging himself through the commander's hatch, while small arms fire chattered all around. Enemy fighters had been waiting, hidden in buildings, and they opened up the moment the tank stopped moving. Rounds snapped past his head, sparked off armor, kicked up dust geysers in the street. Jack had appeared beside him like a guardian angel, firing his rifle, screaming for Marcus to move, to run, to get to cover. But Marcus's legs would not work properly. Something was wrong with his left knee, and every step sent lightning bolts of agony through his entire body. "Get to the alley," Jack had shouted, grabbing Marcus's arm, half carrying him. "Move, Iron, move!" They had made it maybe 30 meters when Marcus realized they were surrounded. Insurgents closing in from 3 directions. His radio was dead. His weapon was gone, lost in the explosion. They were alone, exposed, and about to die. Marcus had made a decision, the kind of decision that haunts you forever. He had radioed for artillery, screaming coordinates into his backup handset, calling for fire on their own position. Danger close, within 100 meters. The kind of fire mission that had a high probability of killing everyone in the impact zone, friendlies included, but it was their only chance. Jack had heard him calling it in, had understood immediately what it meant. He had looked at Marcus with those ice blue eyes, and something had passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, forgiveness. "Get in the crater," Jack had said, pointing to a bomb crater 10 meters away. "I will cover you." "We go together," Marcus had argued. "No time. Run. Now." Marcus had run. He hated himself for it, but he had run, limping and stumbling, while Jack laid down covering fire, his rifle cracking in steady controlled bursts. Professional, precise, buying seconds with his own life. Marcus had reached the crater and turned back just in time to see Jack sprint toward him. He was going to make it. He was 20 meters away, 15, 10. And then the artillery arrived, 155mm rounds, high explosive, walking across the street in a line of apocalyptic destruction. The insurgents disappeared in fire and shrapnel. Buildings collapsed. The earth itself seemed to scream. And Jack, running full speed, had been caught in the final explosion. Marcus had seen him lifted off his feet, thrown forward by the blast wave. He landed in the crater beside Marcus, broken and bleeding, his body shield Marcus from the worst of the shrapnel. He had known. Even in those final seconds, Jack had known where the rounds would land, and he had used his own body to protect his friend. Marcus had held him while he died. It took maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like hours. Jack had tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips, his eyes already going distant. "Tell Eric," Jack had whispered, his voice barely audible over the ringing in Marcus's ears. "Tell him I chose this. Tell him dying for your brothers is not tragedy, it is privilege." Then Jack's hand had found Marcus's, squeezed once, and went limp. Marcus had screamed. He could not remember the words, only the raw animal sound of grief tearing itself from his chest. He had held Jack's body until the rescue team arrived 20 minutes later, and even then they had to pry his fingers loose, one by one, because he could not let go. The investigation had cleared him. Righteous shoot, they called it. Necessary force. Jack Strand died a hero, and Captain Marcus Aldridge received a Bronze Star for calling in the fire that saved their lives. But Marcus knew the truth. He had killed his best friend. Maybe not legally, maybe not technically, but in all the ways that mattered, Jack's blood was on his hands. He had gone to the funeral, stood in the back, watching from a distance, while the Swedish honor guard folded the flag and presented it to Jack's widow. He had seen Eric, 13 years old, standing like a statue in his dark suit, his face a mask of controlled grief. Their eyes had met across the cemetery. Marcus had tried to convey something. Sorrow, apology, love for the boy's father. But Eric's expression had not changed. He had simply stared, his blue eyes so much like Jack's, and Marcus had seen the question there. "Why are you alive when my father is dead?" Marcus had not gone to the reception, had not tried to speak to the family. What could he say? "Your father died saving my worthless life. I called the artillery that killed him. He told me to tell you he loved you, but I was too much of a coward to face you." He had returned to the war instead, threw himself into deployment after deployment, seeking something he could never quite name. Redemption, maybe? Or punishment? Or just the sweet oblivion of staying so busy that the ghost could not catch up. Now, 17 years later, those ghosts had found him anyway. Eric Strand had requested him specifically. The boy had grown into a man, and that man wanted to face the warrior who had gotten his father killed. Marcus did not know if this was an opportunity for redemption or just a slow-motion execution. But he knew he owed Jack this much. If Eric needed to scream at him, to blame him, to finally ask all the questions that must have been eating at him for 17 years, then Marcus would stand there and take it. It was the least he could do for the man who had died in his place. He carefully wrapped Jack's photograph back in the t-shirt and placed it in his duffel bag. Then he closed the locker for what might be the last time, its metal door clanging shut with a finality that echoed through the empty room. 3 weeks until retirement. But first, one last mission, one last chance to keep a promise to a dead friend. Marcus Aldridge, iron, walked out of the locker room and into the Georgia sunlight, carrying ghosts on his shoulders and steel in his spine, ready to face the son of the man he had killed. Chapter 3. The Team. Fort Benning sprawled across 182,000 acres of Georgia pine forest and red clay, a city unto itself dedicated to the ancient art of turning civilians into warriors. Marcus had spent more years on this base than he cared to count, training on ranges where the smell of cordite never quite faded, walking roads where generations of tankers had walked before him. He found Sergeant Major Victor Kowalski exactly where he expected him to be, the tank maintenance bay, elbow deep in the engine compartment of an M1 Abrams, cursing in Polish and English simultaneously, which meant something had gone very wrong or very right. With Kowalski, it was hard to tell the difference. "Tank," Marcus called from the bay entrance. Kowalski emerged from the engine compartment like a bear coming out of hibernation, his massive frame unfolding to its full 6'4" height. He was built like a refrigerator with a crew cut, all shoulders and scarred knuckles, and the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite by an artist with a grudge. 54 years old and still capable of deadlifting the back end of a Humvee, or so he claimed. Iron. Kowalski's face split into a grin that transformed him from terrifying to merely intimidating. "Heard a rumor you were coming by. Also heard a rumor you are an idiot." "Which rumor?" "The one where you agreed to train Jack's kid. in Latvia, 6 weeks before retirement. Marcus stepped into the bay, the familiar smells of grease and diesel wrapping around him like a blanket. General Vance asked. I said yes. General Vance could ask you to jump off a bridge, and you would ask how high. Kowalski grabbed a rag and wiped his hands, the motion automatic after decades of maintenance work. This is a bad idea, boss. That kid hates you. Maybe. No, maybe. I seen the way he looked at you at Jack's funeral, like you were the devil himself. Marcus leaned against a tool bench, suddenly tired. He has a right to his feelings. Sure, and you got a right to not walk into an ambush. Kowalski tossed the rag aside and crossed his arms, his expression serious now. Talk to me, Iron. What is this really about? Penance, guilt, some kind of death wish? I owe Jack. Jack is dead, has been for 17 years. You do not owe him anything. I owe him everything. Marcus met Kowalski's eyes, his voice quiet but firm. He died because of me, Tank. Because I made a call. Maybe the right call, maybe the only call, but he is still dead and I am still here. If his son needs training, if he needs anything I can give him, then I am going to give it. End of story. Kowalski studied him for a long moment, the kind of look that comes from 30 years of friendship and shared foxholes. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders dropping. You are going to get your heart broken, you know that? That kid is not looking for reconciliation. He is looking for a target. Then I will be a target. Stubborn Polish mule. You are the Polish one. Exactly. Takes one to know one. Kowalski grabbed his jacket from a hook. When do we leave? Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, relief, gratitude. The bone-deep comfort of knowing that when you walked into hell, you would not be walking alone. Friday morning. You do not have to come, Tank. This is not your fight. Kowalski laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling in a barrel. Not my fight? Jack was my friend too. You think I am letting you face his kid without backup? Besides, somebody needs to keep you from doing something heroically stupid. That was always my job. They walked together across the motor pool, boots crunching on gravel, the late afternoon sun painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Tanks sat in neat rows, silent and massive, metal dinosaurs waiting for their next evolution. Marcus had spent his whole adult life around these machines. Sometimes he felt like he understood them better than he understood people. You talked to Emma yet? Kowalski asked. Not yet. Figured I would catch her at the range. Good luck. She has been running the new lieutenants through combat drills all week. I think she is trying to break the Army record for most soldiers made to cry in a single training evolution. Marcus smiled. Lieutenant Emma Rossi had earned her reputation as a hard case the old-fashioned way, by being smarter, tougher, and more competent than half the officers twice her age. She was 29 but carried herself with the confidence of a veteran, probably because she had earned that confidence in the mountains of Afghanistan, commanding a striker vehicle through some of the worst terrain and worst fighting of the war. They found her on Range 19, standing in the observation tower, with binoculars pressed to her eyes, watching a platoon of fresh lieutenants attempt to coordinate a simulated attack. Even from a distance, Marcus could hear her voice over the radio, cutting and precise. Blue 2, your spacing is garbage. You are bunched up like tourists at Disney World. One RPG would kill your entire squad. Spread out or I will fail every single one of you. Kowalski grinned. She is in a good mood today. They climbed the tower stairs, their boots ringing on metal. Emma did not turn around, her attention locked on the exercise below. Whatever you are selling, I am not buying, as she called. I am busy teaching children not to die stupidly. How is that going? Marcus asked. Terribly. I give them 6 months in combat before they do something fatally incompetent. She lowered the binoculars and turned, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. Captain Aldridge, Sergeant Major. To what do I owe the pleasure? Got a job for you, Marcus said. Latvia, 6 weeks. Training Swedish air defense crews. Emma's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition of an opportunity. Air defense is not my specialty, she said. No, but training warriors is. And these crews need more than technical instruction. They need somebody who understands how to fight when the computers fail and the networks go dark. You mean they need tankers? Emma almost smiled. Old school doctrine, manual targeting, the kind of skills everybody says are obsolete. Everybody is wrong, Kowalski rumbled. Just took a war with drones and cruise missiles to remind the world that guns still work when batteries die. Emma studied them both, her expression thoughtful. Who is leading the Swedish unit? Major Eric Strand, Marcus said quietly. Understanding dawned in Emma's eyes. She knew the story. Everyone who had served with Marcus knew the story of Jack Strand, the warrior who had died saving his commander, and the son who blamed that commander for his father's death. This is personal, she said. It was not a question. Everything is personal, Marcus replied. The question is whether you are coming. Emma looked back at the training range, where the fresh lieutenants were still making mistakes that would get them killed in real combat. She was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could almost see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if this mission was worth abandoning the relative safety and predictability of training command. My father died because his convoy did not have proper air defense, she said finally, her voice soft. Some insurgent with a drone dropped explosives on their vehicles. They had nothing to shoot back with, just small arms and fear. She turned back to Marcus. If you are teaching these crews how to protect convoys, how to keep soldiers alive against aerial threats, then yes, sir, I am coming. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. Emma Rossi carried her own ghosts, her own need for purpose. They were alike in that way, he and she. Warriors shaped by loss, defined by the people they had failed to save. We leave Friday, he said, pack for cold weather. Latvia in December is not exactly tropical. Copy that. Emma extended her hand and Marcus shook it, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip. Thank you for bringing me, sir. This matters. It matters to all of us, Kowalski said. Now let us go drink beer and pretend we are not terrified of facing an angry Swede who probably wants to murder Iron in his sleep. They descended the tower together, three warriors bound by shared history and shared purpose, heading toward a mission that promised either redemption or ruin. Marcus did not know which, but he knew that for the first time in 3 years since Sarah died, he felt something other than numbness. He felt alive. Chapter 4, The Crossing. The C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft was not designed for comfort. It was designed to move tanks and troops and cargo across oceans at 500 miles per hour, and it accomplished this mission with brutal efficiency and zero concern for the comfort of its human passengers. Marcus sat on the red canvas bench seat, the roar of the engines loud enough to make conversation nearly impossible, watching the interior of the cargo bay sway slightly with turbulence. Across from him, Kowalski had somehow managed to fall asleep, his massive frame folded into a position that should have been anatomically impossible. His head tilted back, snoring loud enough to be heard over the engines. Emma sat beside Marcus, reading from a tablet, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. She had been reviewing technical specifications for the LVKV 9040 system since they left Georgia, absorbing information with the single-minded intensity of a student preparing for the most important exam of her life. They had been in the air for 8 hours, 4 more to go before they reached Ramstein Air Base in Germany, where they would switch to a smaller transport for the final leg into Latvia. Marcus had made this journey before, crossing the Atlantic to deploy to distant wars, but it never got easier. Something about being suspended in the sky at 30,000 feet, cut off from the earth, untethered from anything solid or real, always made him uneasy. Maybe that was why tankers loved the ground so much. Tanks were heavy, anchored, undeniably present. You could not fall out of a tank. You could not crash a tank, not in the traditional sense. The earth held you, and you held the earth, and there was comfort in that connection. Emma looked up from her tablet, catching his eye. She had to lean close and raise her voice to be heard over the engines. Sir, can I ask you something? Shoot! What do you think Major Strand wants? Really wants, I mean, beyond the training. Marcus considered the question. He had been asking himself the same thing for the last 3 days, trying to imagine what kind of man Eric had become. What kind of officer? What kind of son carrying his father's legacy like a weight on his shoulders? I think he wants answers, Marcus said. I think he has questions he has been carrying for 17 years, and he figures I am the only one who can answer them. What if the answers do not make him feel better? Then at least he will know. Not knowing is worse, believe me. Emma nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. My father died in Afghanistan, IED. I was 16. For years I was angry at everyone. Angry at the army for sending him. Angry at the insurgents for killing him. Angry at him for joining in the first place. But mostly I was angry because I did not understand why. Why that day? Why that road? Why him? Did you ever find answers? No, but I found purpose, joined the army, learned to do what he did, and somehow that helped. Not because I understood his death, but because I understood his life, what he fought for, what mattered to him. She paused. Maybe that is what Major Strand needs, not answers, just understanding. Marcus hoped she was right, but he suspected Eric's needs went deeper than understanding. Grief was not always rational. Sometimes it needed a target, someone to blame, a way to make sense of senseless loss. And Marcus had been that target for 17 years. The aircraft hit turbulence, bouncing hard enough to wake Kowalski, who jerked upright with a snort and looked around wildly. We crashing? He asked. Not yet, Marcus said. Wake me when we do. Kowalski closed his eyes again. Emma smiled and returned to her tablet. Marcus leaned back against the cold metal bulkhead and closed his own eyes, not sleeping but thinking, preparing himself for what was coming. Somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, suspended between worlds, Marcus Aldridge made a promise to the ghost of Jack Strand. Whatever Eric needed from him, whatever pain or anger or questions the young man carried, Marcus would face it. He owed Jack that much. He owed Sarah that much because she would have wanted him to try, to reach out, to build something instead of just carrying grief until it crushed him. One last mission, one last chance to matter. The engines roared. The aircraft flew on through the darkness, and Marcus prepared himself to face the son of the man he had killed. Chapter 5, The Meeting. A Dazi military base set in the pine forests of Latvia, 40 kilometers from Riga, a sprawling complex of Soviet-era concrete buildings slowly being modernized by NATO investment. Marcus stepped off the transport aircraft into cold December air that bit at exposed skin and made breath turn to fog. The temperature was maybe 20 degrees Fahrenheit, the sky a uniform gray that promised snow. This was warrior weather, the kind of cold that sorted the committed from the comfortable. A Swedish liaison officer met them on the tarmac, a young captain with a blonde mustache and the kind of crisp efficiency that suggested he had been educated at expensive military academies and had never seen actual combat. Captain Aldridge, welcome to Latvia. Major Strand is expecting you in Building 7. I will show you to your quarters first so you can drop your gear. No need, Marcus said. Take me to Major Strand now. The Swedish captain hesitated, probably accustomed to officers who wanted hot showers and coffee before conducting business. But something in Marcus's tone made him nod and gesture toward a waiting vehicle. They drove through the base in a Mercedes G-Wagon, passing rows of barracks and training facilities, Swedish and Latvian flags flying side by side. NATO had transformed this place over the last decade, turning it into one of the alliance's key forward operating bases. A statement that the Baltic states would not be abandoned, would not be left vulnerable to the kind of aggression that had consumed Ukraine. Building 7 was a low concrete structure that looked like it had been poured during the Cold War and never updated. Inside, the hallways were painted institutional green, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed and flickered. The Swedish captain led them to a conference room at the end of the hall and knocked once. Enter, a voice called from inside. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. He had not heard that voice in 17 years, but he recognized it instantly. Eric, Jack's son. The boy who had become a man while Marcus was busy fighting wars and failing to save the people he loved. He stepped through the door. The conference room was sparse. A long table, metal chairs, maps of Latvia pinned to the walls, a coffee maker in the corner that looked older than Marcus. And standing at the head of the table, reviewing a tactical display on a laptop, was Major Eric Strand. He looked like his father. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. The resemblance so strong it was almost painful. The same tall frame, the same blonde hair, though Eric wore his shorter, the same ice blue eyes. But where Jack had been all warmth and easy charisma, Eric projected something colder, more controlled. This was a man who had learned to contain his emotions behind military professionalism. Eric looked up as they entered. His expression did not change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. Recognition, assessment, and yes, anger, buried deep but still burning after all these years. Captain Aldridge, Eric's voice was level, professional, giving nothing away. Thank you for coming. Major Strand. Marcus stopped 3 paces from the table, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain professional distance. This is Sergeant Major Kowalski and Lieutenant Rossi. They will be assisting with training. Eric's gaze shifted to Kowalski. and for the first time his professional mask cracked slightly. "Sergeant Major, my father spoke of you in his letters. It is good to finally meet you." Kowalski nodded, his own expression unreadable. "Your father was a hell of a warrior, son. Best gunner I ever served with." "So I am told." Eric gestured to the chairs around the table. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." They settled into the uncomfortable metal chairs, and Eric remained standing, shifting into briefing mode with the ease of an officer who had given thousands of presentations. The LVKV 9040 program is critical to Swedish defense policy and NATO's Eastern Flank strategy. We are deploying 4 systems here in Latvia, with 12 crews total. Your mission is to train those crews to NATO standards within 6 weeks. After that, my unit will assume operational responsibility for short-range air defense across this sector. He clicked a button on his laptop, and a map appeared on the wall screen behind him. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, 3 small countries pressed against the Baltic Sea, their eastern borders touching Russia like a wound that had never quite healed. Threat assessment, Eric continued. Russian reconnaissance drones violate our airspace on average twice per week. Fast movers, low altitude, designed to probe our response times and map our defenses. Additionally, we assess a moderate probability of cruise missile strikes against NATO logistics infrastructure in the event of regional conflict. Emma leaned forward. What systems are currently providing air defense? Primarily missile-based, Patriots, NASAMS, some legacy Soviet systems operated by Latvian forces. But there are gaps. Low-altitude coverage is insufficient, and missile inventory cannot sustain a high-tempo engagement against cheap threats. That is where the LV Kyiv comes in. Guns, Kowalski said. Cheap, sustainable, effective against drones and cruise missiles in the terminal phase. Exactly. Eric's expression warmed slightly, the first sign of genuine enthusiasm. The LVKV fires programmable 40mm ammunition. Each round costs approximately $40. Kill probability against a Shahed-class drone is 85%. By contrast, a single Patriot missile costs $4 million. The economics are obvious. Marcus spoke for the first time since sitting down. Economics do not matter if your crews cannot hit their targets. What is your current proficiency level? Eric's jaw tightened slightly, and Marcus saw the flash of irritation before it was suppressed. Adequate for peacetime standards, we have certified gunners, trained fire control operators, maintained equipment. That was not what I asked. The room went silent. Eric stared at Marcus, and for a moment the professional facade cracked completely, revealing the anger beneath. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. Our proficiency is 75% against standardized targets in optimal conditions. If you are asking whether we are combat ready, the answer is no. That is why you are here, to make us ready. Marcus held his gaze, neither backing down nor escalating. This was a test. Eric needed to know whether Marcus would coddle him, treat him like Jack's son instead of a warrior who needed honest assessment. So Marcus gave him honesty. 75% is not good enough. In combat, optimal conditions do not exist. Your targets will be faster, more evasive, more numerous than any training scenario. Your crews will be tired, scared, operating in darkness or bad weather or under jamming. 75% in training means 50% in combat, and 50% means dead convoys and burning supply depots. Eric's hands clenched on the back of his chair. Then what do you suggest, Captain? I suggest we start over. Strip away the computer assists. Train your gunners to acquire and engage targets manually. Build instinct and muscle memory instead of relying on systems that can fail. Your father could shoot down a helicopter with a tank cannon because he trusted his eyes and his hands more than any screen. The mention of Jack hung in the air like smoke. Eric's expression went very still, very controlled, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Do not presume to tell me what my father could or could not do. You did not know him. I knew him better than almost anyone. You got him killed. The words landed like artillery rounds, and Marcus felt them detonate in his chest. Kowalski shifted in his seat, ready to intervene, but Marcus held up a hand. This needed to happen. The wound needed to be opened before it could heal. Yes, Marcus said quietly. I did. Eric blinked, clearly not expecting that response. What? I got your father killed. I made the call that brought artillery down on our position. I was the commanding officer. The responsibility was mine. And not a day goes by that I do not wish I had died instead of him. The silence in the room was absolute. Eric stared at Marcus, his ice blue eyes searching, looking for something. A lie. An excuse. Some way to maintain the anger he had carried for 17 years. But Marcus gave him only truth, and truth was harder to hate than lies. "My father died saving you," Eric said finally, his voice unsteady. "He ran into that artillery strike to pull you to safety. He chose to die for you." "Why not?" "Because he loved me. Because that is what warriors do for their brothers. Because in that moment, he decided my life was worth his sacrifice." Marcus leaned forward, his own eyes locked on Eric's. "And I have spent 17 years trying to be worthy of that sacrifice, trying to honor him by keeping other warriors alive, by passing on what he taught me, by being the kind of commander he would have wanted me to be." Eric's composure finally shattered. He turned away, his shoulders shaking, one hand pressed to his face. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Eric took a shuddering breath and turned back, his eyes red but his voice steady. "I was 13 years old. I needed someone to blame. It was easier to hate you than to accept that he chose to die. I know. I have hated you for 17 years. I know that too." Eric wiped his eyes roughly, angry at himself for showing weakness. "So why did you come? Why agree to train me when you knew I hated you?" Marcus stood slowly, his old knees protesting. He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Eric, close enough to see the young man's face clearly, to see Jack's features reflected in his son. "Because I owed your father everything, and because keeping you alive is the only way I know to repay that debt." Eric stared at him, and Marcus could see the war happening behind those blue eyes. The need to maintain anger, fighting against the need to understand, to heal, to finally lay down a burden that had been too heavy to carry alone. Finally, Eric extended his hand. "Teach me," he said. "Teach me everything my father learned from you. Make me the warrior he was." Marcus took his hand, feeling the strength in Eric's grip, the determination. "Your father was a better warrior than I will ever be, but I will teach you everything I know, and we will make sure you survive long enough to become better than both of us." They shook, and in that moment something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. The first fragile step toward healing a wound that had festered for too long. Kowalski cleared his throat. "So when do we start shooting things?" Eric almost smiled. "Tomorrow morning, 0600, range 12. Bring cold weather gear. Latvia in December is not forgiving." "Neither are we," Marcus said. "Get your crews ready, Major. We are going to train like your lives depend on it, because they do." Eric nodded, his professional mask sliding back into place. But something had changed in his eyes. The anger was still there, but now it had direction, purpose. He was ready to learn. "Dismissed," Eric said. "I will have quarters assigned to you. We briefed the full training plan at 1900 tonight." They filed out of the conference room, leaving Eric alone with his laptop and his maps and his ghosts. In the hallway, Kowalski let out a long breath. "Well, that could have gone worse." "Could have gone better too," Emma said. Marcus said nothing. He was thinking about Jack, about the promise he had made to a dying friend, about the chance he had been given to finally make something right after years of carrying guilt like stones in his pockets. One last mission, one last chance to save the son of the man he had failed to save. Outside, it started to snow. The warriors who survive are not always the strongest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who refuse to quit. Chapter 6. Dawn at the Guns. The Baltic winter did not care about military schedules or human comfort. It arrived with the same indifferent brutality it had shown for 10,000 years, turning the world into shades of white and gray, erasing the boundary between earth and sky until everything became one frozen void. Marcus stood at the edge of range 12 at 0545, 15 minutes before the scheduled training time, watching his breath turn to fog in the pre-dawn darkness. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, and the wind coming off the Baltic Sea carried ice crystals that stung exposed skin like tiny needles. This was the kind of cold that made you appreciate fire, made you understand why ancient humans had worshipped the sun. Behind him, Kowalski was setting up equipment with the methodical efficiency of a man who had prepared for training exercises in every climate on Earth. Spotting scopes, thermal imaging cameras, ammunition crates stacked in neat rows. The sergeant major worked in silence, his massive frame moving with surprising grace, his breath coming in steady clouds. Emma arrived at 0550, leading a detail of 4 U.S. Army specialists who would serve as range safety officers and technical advisors. She looked at Marcus, nodded once, and began positioning her team without needing to be told. They had worked together long enough to communicate without words, the way good crews learn to anticipate each other's needs. At exactly 0600, the Swedish crews arrived. There were 12 of them, organized into 4 teams of 3. Driver, gunner, commander. They came in a convoy of vehicles, headlights cutting through the darkness, exhaust steaming in the cold air. Marcus watched them dismount, watched the way they moved, the way they stood, looking for the small tells that separated warriors who would survive from those who would not. Eric Strand was the first to approach, his boots crunching on frozen ground. He wore full combat gear, rifle slung across his chest, his face already red from the cold. Behind him came his crew. The driver, a young kid who could not have been more than 22, nervous energy radiating off him like heat, and the gunner. Corporal Anders Bergstrom. Marcus studied him carefully. Mid-20s, average height, lean build, but it was his eyes that mattered. They were calm, focused, the eyes of someone who had learned to control fear instead of being controlled by it. This one might have potential. Crews present and ready, Captain, Eric reported formally. Marcus nodded. Good morning, Major. Before we begin, I need to understand what we are working with. Sergeant Major Kowalski will brief the exercise. Pay attention. There will not be a second explanation. Kowalski stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the frozen range, despite not raising it. Volume was not about shouting. It was about command presence, and Kowalski had that in abundance. Gentlemen, welcome to Pain. For the next 6 weeks, you will learn to shoot without computers, coordinate without radios, and function without any of the comfortable technology you have come to rely on. Why? Because in combat, everything fails. Satellites get jammed, networks get hacked, targeting computers get hit by shrapnel. When that happens, you will have 3 things: your eyes, your hands, your crew. Learn to trust them or learn to die. Those are your options. He gestured to the LKV 9040 system parked at the firing line, its 40mm cannon pointing toward the sky, dormant but menacing in the gray light. Today's exercise is simple: manual target acquisition and engagement. No computer assists, pure optical targeting. You will engage 30 drone targets launched in 3 waves of 10. Your standard says 75% success is passing. I am telling you right now, 75% is failure. In combat, every miss is a dead soldier. Every hesitation is a burning convoy. You will achieve 90%, or you will run this course until your hands bleed and your eyes cannot focus. Questions? One of the younger gunners raised his hand hesitantly. Sergeant Major, our doctrine calls for computer-assisted targeting for optimal accuracy. Your doctrine was written by people who never had to fight when the computers died, Kowalski said flatly. Captain Aldridge, you want to explain to these young warriors why manual skills matter? Marcus stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying weight that made the crews lean in to hear him. I have commanded tanks for 36 years. M1 Abrams, 60 tons of steel and rage, the most technologically advanced fighting vehicle on Earth. And you know what saved my life more times than I can count? Not the thermal sights, not the laser rangefinder, not the ballistic computer. It was my gunner's ability to acquire and engage a target using nothing but his eyes and his training when all those fancy systems went dark. He looked at Anders directly. Corporal Bergstrom, your major's father was my gunner in the Gulf War. Jack Strand could shoot down a helicopter with a tank cannon using manual sights because he trusted his instincts more than any machine. He saved my life 6 times doing things that computers said were impossible. If you want to be half the warrior he was, you will learn to shoot the way he did, with your eyes open and your finger ready. Anders straightened slightly, his expression shifting from skeptical to determined. Yes, sir. Good. Mount up. Let's just see what you can do. The crews moved to their vehicles, the drivers settling into their positions, the commanders climbing into their hatches, the gunners sliding into their seats behind the weapons. Marcus watched Eric take his position in the commander's hatch of the lead LVQV, his movements practiced and efficient. The kid had been trained well. Now it was time to see if training translated to competence. Emma's voice crackled over the radio net. Range is hot. First wave launching in 60 seconds. Marcus moved to the observation post, a reinforced bunker 50 meters behind the firing line. Kowalski joined him, both men raising binoculars to watch the sky. The range stretched out before them, a frozen expanse of flat terrain backed by distant tree lines. Target drones would launch from a concealed position 2 kilometers out, programmed to fly various profiles designed to simulate real threats. You think they can do this? Kowalski asked quietly. I think they better learn fast, Marcus replied. Eric has good instincts, but instincts are not enough. He needs to trust his crew, trust that when he calls a target, his gunner will acquire and engage without hesitation. Like you and Jack. Like me and Jack. The radio crackled. First wave away, 10 targets inbound, range 1,800 meters, altitude 400 feet, speed 60 knots. Marcus watched through his binoculars as the first drone appeared against the gray sky, a small dark shape moving from left to right across his field of view. Then another, then 3 more. Within seconds, all 10 targets were airborne, flying in a loose formation that would force the gunners to track multiple threats simultaneously. Engage when ready, Marcus transmitted. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crews were acquiring targets, training their optical sights, calculating lead angles and trajectories the way warriors had been doing since humans first threw spears at running prey. It was ancient mathematics, written into our DNA, but it required practice to translate instinct into accuracy. The first LV opened fire. The 40mm autocannon made a sound like the world tearing itself in half, a rapid hammering that echoed across the frozen range. Tracer rounds arced into the sky, bright lines of death reaching for the first drone. Miss! The tracers passed 10 feet behind the target. The gunner corrected, leading the target more, and fired again. Hit! The drone exploded in a small fireball, pieces tumbling to the ground, trailing smoke. First kill, Emma reported over the radio, 9 targets remaining. The other Level KV systems opened up now, their cannons creating a symphony of controlled violence. Marcus watched through his binoculars, mentally scoring each engagement. Hit, miss, hit, miss, hit. The drones were falling, but not fast enough, not efficiently enough. They are jerky, Kowalski observed, overcorrecting, not trusting their first instinct. They are thinking too much, Marcus agreed, trying to calculate instead of feel. By the time the first wave was complete, 7 of 10 targets had been destroyed. 70%. Barely acceptable by peacetime standards, utterly inadequate for combat. Marcus keyed his radio. Cease fire, all crews, dismount and assemble at the observation post. The Swedish crews climbed out of their vehicles and trudged through the snow to where Marcus waited. They looked frustrated, embarrassed, angry at themselves for missing targets that should have been easy. Good. Anger was better than complacency. 7 out of 10, Marcus said flatly. 70%. By NATO standards, you passed. By combat standards, you just killed 3 friendly convoys because your covering fire was inadequate. Let us talk about what went wrong. He looked at Anders, the lead gunner. Corporal, why did you miss your first shot? Anders hesitated, then straightened. I was leading the target, sir, but I second-guessed my calculation and adjusted too much. You thought instead of shooting. Your first instinct was correct. Your brain talked you out of it. In combat, hesitation kills. When you acquire a target and your instinct says fire, you fire. Trust the training, trust the muscle memory. Your conscious mind is too slow for this work. He turned to Eric. Major, your crew's communication was adequate but not optimal. I heard you calling targets by clock position and range. Good, but I did not hear confirmation from your gunner before he engaged. How do you know he was tracking the same target you were calling? Eric's jaw tightened. I assumed he understood. Assume nothing. Your gunner should confirm target acquisition before engaging. 2 seconds of communication prevents 30 seconds of wasted ammunition on the wrong threat. You and your crew need to function as one organism, not 3 individuals sharing a vehicle. He looked at all 12 crews, making eye contact with each warrior in turn. You are all competent gunners. You have been trained well. But training is not the same as fighting. Combat is faster, dirtier, more chaotic than any exercise. Equipment fails. People panic. The enemy does not cooperate with your plan. The only thing that keeps you alive is muscle memory so deep it bypasses conscious thought. You need to shoot the way you breathe. Automatically, without thinking. That is what we are going to build over the next 6 weeks. One of the younger commanders raised his hand. Sir, with respect, our doctrine emphasizes computer-assisted targeting for a reason. Manual skills are slower, less accurate. Your doctrine is written for optimal conditions, Marcus replied. I am training you for worse conditions, for when the computers are dead and the enemy is still coming, for when you have to choose between fighting manually or dying professionally. He gestured back toward the range. Mount up, we are running this exercise again, and we will keep running it until you stop thinking and start shooting. They returned to their vehicles without complaint. Whatever else could be said about them, these Swedish warriors were not quitters. They understood hard work. They just needed to learn to trust themselves. The second wave went better. 9 out of 10 kills, 80%. The third wave was ragged, 6 out of 10. Fatigue was setting in, the cold was sapping concentration, and the crews were starting to make the kinds of mistakes that came from pushing too hard too fast. Marcus called a halt at 0900. 3 hours of continuous training. The crews dismounted again, this time moving slower, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Better, Marcus said. Not good, but better. You are learning. Tomorrow we do this again, and the day after, and the day after that, until manual targeting becomes as natural as breathing. Dismissed. Get some food and rest. We reconvene at 1300 for classroom instruction on overlapping fields of fire. The crews dispersed toward the mess hall, and Eric lingered behind, his expression troubled. He waited until the others were out of earshot before speaking. Captain, a word? Marcus nodded, and they walked together away from the observation post, boots crunching on frozen ground. Eric was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something he needed to say, but did not know how to phrase. My father, he said finally, in your stories about him, you make him sound like some kind of legend, superhuman. Was he really that good? Marcus considered his answer carefully. Jack had been extraordinary, but legends were dangerous. They set impossible standards that crushed the people trying to live up to them. Your father was one of the best warriors I ever served with, Marcus said honestly. But he was not superhuman. He made mistakes, he got scared, he doubted himself. What made him special was that he refused to let fear or doubt stop him from doing what needed to be done. He trained until his skills became instinct, and he trusted his crew completely. That trust is what made him lethal. Eric nodded slowly. I want to be like him, but I do not know if I can. You do not have to be like him, Marcus said. You have to be the best version of yourself. Your father was Jack Strand. You are Eric Strand. Different warriors, different strengths, but the same commitment to excellence, the same refusal to quit. That is what matters. Did he ever talk about me in Iraq before he died? The question hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. He stopped walking, turned to face Eric directly. Every day. He carried your letters in his vest pocket, right over his heart. He read them so many times the paper started to fall apart. He was so proud of you, Eric. Proud of the man you were becoming. His last words to me were about you. Eric's voice was barely a whisper. What did he say? Marcus took a breath, choosing his words with the care of a man defusing a bomb. He said to tell you he loved you, that dying for your brothers is not tragedy, it is privilege. And that you should be a warrior, not just a soldier. That was important to him. The difference between someone who wears a uniform and someone who lives the code. What is the difference? A soldier follows orders. A warrior takes responsibility. A soldier does what he is told. A warrior does what is right, even when no one is watching, even when it costs him everything. Marcus held Eric's gaze. Your father was a warrior, and so are you, whether you believe it yet or not. Something shifted in Eric's expression. Not quite peace, but the beginning of acceptance. He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it, feeling the strength there, the determination. Thank you, Eric said simply, for telling me, for being here, for giving a damn about a kid whose father you got killed. I did not get your father killed, Marcus said firmly. War got him killed. He made a choice, a warrior's choice, and he would make it again. Honor that choice by becoming the man he believed you could be. Eric nodded, released his hand, and walked away toward the barracks. Marcus watched him go, feeling something loosen in his chest, the first crack in the wall between them. Not forgiveness yet, but the possibility of it. Kowalski appeared at his elbow, materializing the way he always did when Marcus needed him most. That looked like progress, the sergeant major observed. Maybe. Or maybe just two men finally talking instead of hating from a distance. I will take it. You know what Jack would say if he could see this? Marcus smiled slightly. He would say we are both idiots for waiting 17 years. Damn right he would. Kowalski clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, old man. Let us go drink coffee and pretend we are not freezing our asses off in Latvia in December. They walked together back toward the base, Two warriors who had survived wars and losses, and the kind of pain that would have broken lesser men. Behind them, the LV system sat silent on the frozen range, waiting for tomorrow's training, waiting to transform soft crews into hard warriors. The snow started to fall again, gentle and relentless, covering everything in white. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. 2 weeks into training, and the cracks began to open. It was not the cold, though the temperature had dropped to 5 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed there. It was not the pace, though Marcus was running the crews through 8 hours of live fire training every day, pushing them until hands shook from exhaustion and eyes burned from staring at the sky. It was not even the standards, though Marcus had raised the passing threshold from 75% to 90% and refused to accept anything less. It was the ammunition. Marcus stood in the armory at 0600 on a Wednesday morning, staring at the problem that might kill the entire training program. Laid out on the inspection table were 50 rounds of 40mm programmable ammunition, pulled at random from the stockpile. Kowalski had test-fired 10 of them yesterday afternoon. 4 had failed to detonate properly. 40% failure rate. "Talk to me, Tank," Marcus said quietly. Kowalski picked up one of the failed rounds, turning it over in his massive hands like a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. "Ammunition is dated 2008, 17 years old. The electronic fuses are degraded. They are not receiving the programming signal reliably, so the airburst function fails. Round just punches through the target or detonates late. Can we fix it? Not here. Not with the equipment we have. We would need to send them back to Bofors in Sweden for refurbishment, but that would take months, and even then there is no guarantee they could salvage this batch." Marcus felt cold certainty settle into his gut. Without reliable programmable ammunition, the LVKV system lost most of its effectiveness. Standard rounds could still kill targets with direct hits, but the real value of the 40mm was the airburst capability, creating a fragmentation cloud that could shred multiple drones simultaneously. "How many rounds do we have total?" 4,000. If the failure rate is consistent across the whole stockpile, that means 1,600 rounds are defective. Not enough good ammunition to sustain combat operations for more than a week. "And how long to manufacture new ammunition?" Kowalski's expression told Marcus everything he needed to know before the sergeant major spoke. Bofors shut down this production line 15 years ago when Sweden mothballed the LVKV program. They would have to retool from scratch. Minimum 6 months, probably closer to a year. Marcus turned away, staring at nothing, his mind racing through options and finding them all inadequate. Without ammunition, Eric's crews could not train properly. Without training, they could not deploy operationally. Without operational deployment, the entire LVKV program would be canceled, and NATO's Baltic defense would remain vulnerable to exactly the kind of low-altitude threats that had killed Sarah. "There has to be another option," he said. "There is," Kowalski replied carefully, "but you are not going to like it." Marcus turned back. "Tell me." U.S. Navy, the close-in weapon system, CIWS. It uses a 20mm Vulcan cannon, but for testing and training they also maintain stocks of 40mm ammunition for various systems. Not exactly the same specification as the Swedish rounds, but close enough, compatible. "How much do they have?" "Enough. The question is whether you can get authorization to transfer it to a Swedish NATO unit for training purposes." Marcus felt the trap closing. Transferring ammunition between services and allied nations required paperwork, authorization, approval chains that stretched from Fort Benning to the Pentagon to Stockholm. That process would take weeks at minimum, possibly months, and they had 4 weeks left before Eric's unit was supposed to certify for operational deployment. Going through channels would mean failure. Going around channels would mean court-martial. Marcus thought about Sarah, dying in a convoy that had no air defense because someone decades ago had decided gun-based systems were obsolete. He thought about Jack, dying in Marcus's place because that was what brothers did for each other. He thought about Eric, trying so hard to live up to a father's legend while carrying the weight of 17 years of grief. He made his decision. "Who do you know in the Navy?" he asked Kowalski. The sergeant major smiled, an expression that did not reach his eyes. "I may know a few old chiefs who owe me favors." "Why do you ask?" "Because we are going to borrow some ammunition. Quietly, without bothering the people whose job it is to say no." "Boss, that is a career-ending move if anyone finds out. Then we better make sure it is worth it." They spent the next 3 days making discreet phone calls, and pulling strings that Marcus had accumulated over 3 decades of service. Kowalski reached out to his network of senior enlisted personnel, the shadowy brotherhood of sergeants major and master chiefs who actually made the military function beneath the official hierarchy. Emma contributed connections from her time in Afghanistan, officers who owed her favors and did not ask too many questions. By Friday afternoon, they had a solution: unofficial, technically illegal, absolutely necessary. A Navy supply convoy heading from Norfolk to Rota, Spain would make an unscheduled stop at Liepaja port in Latvia. It would offload 3 pallets of 40mm ammunition marked for disposal, which would then be transported to a Dazi base and quietly integrated into training stocks. The paperwork would show the ammunition destroyed at sea. In reality, it would be keeping Swedish warriors alive. Marcus called the arrangement into Admiral Richard Hayes, retired, who had been his commanding officer during the second Iraq deployment and still had enough connections to make things happen off the books. Hayes listened in silence, then sighed deeply. Marcus, you are asking me to help you commit fraud, misappropriation of military resources, and violation of about 15 different international agreements. Yes, sir. If this goes wrong, you lose your pension, Emma loses her commission, Kowalski loses his retirement, and I probably go to prison. Yes, sir. And you are doing this for a Swedish kid whose father died under your command? I am doing this, Marcus said quietly, because good warriors are going to deploy with defective ammunition and die unless someone breaks the rules. I have spent 36 years following orders. Let me spend my last month doing what is right instead of what is legal. There was a long silence on the line. Then Hayes laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Your wife would be proud of you, Marcus. Sarah always said you had more integrity than sense. All right, I will make it happen, but when this blows up in your face, and it will, I am going to testify that you threatened to shoot me unless I cooperated. Fair enough, sir, thank you. Do not thank me. Just make sure those Swedish kids do not waste my ammunition. Hayes out. The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone and looked at Kowalski and Emma, who had been listening to his half of the conversation. It is done, he said. Ammunition arrives Monday. We have 4 weeks to train these crews to the point where nobody asks questions about where we got our supplies. And if someone does ask questions, Emma said, then I take full responsibility. This was my call, my career. You two were following orders. Kowalski snorted. Boss, we are way past that noble sacrifice bullshit. We are all in this together. If you burn, we burn. He is right, sir, Emma added. We made this choice as a team. We face the consequences as a team. Marcus looked at them both, these warriors who had chosen to follow him into questionable legality for the sake of doing what was right, and felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Not quite happiness, but purpose. The bone-deep certainty that for once, he was making the kind of decision that would let him sleep at night. All right, he said, then let us make sure it is worth the risk. Starting Monday, we triple the training tempo. I want these crews running live fire exercises until they can hit targets in their sleep. By the time we are done, they will be the best damn gun crews in NATO. And if we get caught? Emma asked. Marcus smiled grimly. Then we go down as the best damn criminals in NATO. Chapter 8. Fire and Brotherhood. The ammunition arrived on a gray Monday morning, delivered in an unmarked truck that drove past the front gate of a Dazi base without stopping, circled around to a maintenance entrance that was supposed to be closed for repairs, and unloaded 3 pallets wrapped in generic shipping plastic. Marcus signed for it with a name that was not his own, watched the truck drive away, and immediately ordered the pallets moved into the armory under guard. No inventory, no paperwork. As far as the official records were concerned, this ammunition did not exist, which meant every round fired would have to count. He gathered the crews at 0700 and told them a partial truth. The old ammunition was unreliable. New ammunition had been acquired through alternative logistics channels. They would now train with live rounds in every exercise, and the standard had just been raised to 95% accuracy because wasting ammunition was no longer acceptable. We have enough rounds for 3 weeks of intensive training, Marcus told them. After that, you deploy with what you have learned. There are no second chances, no do-overs. You will be defending real convoys, real airfields, real civilians. Every target you miss in training is a target that will kill someone you are supposed to protect in combat. So do not miss. The training intensified in ways that pushed the crews beyond anything they had experienced. 8-hour days became 12-hour days. Live fire exercises ran from dawn until the light failed, and then continued under illumination flares and starlight, teaching the gunners to acquire targets in darkness using nothing but their eyes and their instincts. Marcus drove them relentlessly, but he was always there, standing behind the guns, talking them through engagements, correcting mistakes in real time. And slowly, incrementally, they improved. By the end of the second week, Eric's crew was hitting 93% of targets. The other crews were close behind, their proficiency climbing as muscle memory replaced conscious thought. But it was not just the numbers that changed. It was the way the crews moved together, the rhythm they developed, the silent communication that came from spending 12 hours a day in a metal box with two other warriors, learning to predict each other's movements, to trust without question. Marcus watched it happen with something approaching satisfaction. This was what he knew how to do. Not politics, not paperwork, not the comfortable bureaucracy that ruled peacetime militaries. He knew how to take raw warriors and forge them into crews that functioned as single organisms, where the commander's thought became the gunner's action without words, where the driver adjusted position before being asked, where three men became one weapon. On a Friday evening, 3 weeks into training, Marcus stood in the observation post watching Eric's crew run their final certification drill before the weekend break. The sun was setting, painting the frozen range in shades of orange and gold, and the temperature had dropped to 10 below zero. 30 targets launched in a single massive wave, simulating a saturation attack by enemy drones. It was the hardest test Marcus could design, the kind of scenario that would overwhelm most crews and force them to prioritize, to triage, to accept that some targets would get through. Eric's crew engaged with a ferocity that made Marcus's chest tighten with pride. Anders on the gun, firing in controlled bursts, his movements economical and precise. Eric in the commander's position, calling targets in a steady stream of coordinates and corrections. The driver adjusting their hull position to optimize the gun's field of fire without being told. They were beautiful to watch, a symphony of controlled violence. When the smoke cleared, 29 of 30 targets had been destroyed, 97%. Marcus keyed his radio. "Cease fire, excellent work. Secure your system and report to the observation post." The crew dismounted and trudged through the snow, their faces red from cold and exertion, but their eyes bright with accomplishment. They knew they had done something special. Marcus met them at the bunker entrance. 97%. "Outstanding, you missed one target. What happened?" Anders spoke immediately, his voice steady. "Target 23, sir. I acquired late because it merged with target 22 in my sight picture. By the time I separated them visually, 23 had moved out of my optimal engagement envelope. I took the shot anyway, but overcorrected for deflection." "Why did you take the shot if you knew your probability was low?" "Because in combat, a 10% chance is better than 0%, sir. That drone might have been heading for a convoy. I had to try." Marcus nodded slowly. "Correct answer. In training, we chase perfection. In combat, we chase survival. Sometimes a bad shot is better than no shot." "Good call, Corporal." He looked at Eric. "Your crew is ready, Major? Another week of maintenance training and integration drills? And you can certify for operational deployment. Well done." Eric's expression was carefully controlled, but Marcus could see the emotion underneath. Pride. Relief. Something else that looked like gratitude. "Thank you, Captain, for everything." "Thank your crew. They did the work." "No," Eric said quietly. "You gave us the tools. You showed us what was possible. My father would have approved." The words hung in the cold air between them, and Marcus felt something break loose in his chest. Not quite absolution, but close enough. "Your father would have been proud of you," Marcus said. "You have become the warrior he knew you could be." They shook hands, and this time it felt different. Not the grudging contact of men forced together by circumstance, but the grip of warriors who had earned each other's respect through shared hardship and honest effort. "Dismissed," Marcus said. "Go get drunk with your crew. You have earned it." Eric smiled, a real smile that transformed his face and made him look younger, more like the kid Marcus had seen at Jack's funeral. Then he jogged off after his crew, who were already heading toward the barracks and the promise of warmth and alcohol and the kind of celebration that warriors need after proving themselves. Kowalski emerged from the observation bunker, his face split in a wide grin. 97%. Hot damn, boss, we did it." "They did it," Marcus corrected. "We just pointed them in the right direction." "False modesty does not suit you." Kowalski clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to stagger a smaller man. Admit it, you are proud of those kids. I am proud of those warriors, Marcus said. They started as competent gunners. They are finishing as crews. That is what matters. They walked together back toward the base, boots crunching on frozen ground, the sun setting behind them in a blaze of orange and red that turned the snow to fire. You ever think about what comes next? Kowalski asked. After this mission ends? Retirement, finally. And then what? You going to sit in your apartment and watch television until you die? Marcus did not answer immediately. He had been asking himself the same question for 3 years, ever since Sarah died and left a hole in his life that nothing seemed able to fill. He had thought maybe training one more generation of warriors would give him purpose, would justify the years and the scars and the ghosts. But now, walking through the Latvian winter with his oldest friend, watching Eric become the man Jack had known he could be, Marcus realized something. He was not done yet. Maybe he would never be done. Warriors did not retire. They just found new wars to fight, new warriors to train, new ways to matter. I do not know what comes next, he said honestly, but I will figure it out. Well, when you do, let me know. I am getting tired of teaching children not to blow themselves up with hand grenades. Maybe we start a business. Aldridge and Kowalski Consulting. We teach corporate warriors how to survive board meetings. Marcus laughed, a sound that surprised him with its genuineness. That might be the worst idea you have ever had. I have had worse. Remember Panama? We do not talk about Panama. They reached the barracks as full darkness fell, the base lights coming on one by one, pushing back the night. Somewhere in the distance, Marcus could hear the Swedish crew singing, probably already several beers deep into their celebration. He stood there listening, feeling something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Not happiness exactly, but contentment. The knowledge that today he had done something that mattered. He had taken broken warriors and made them whole. He had honored Jack's memory by protecting Jack's son. It would have to be enough. Chapter 9, the letter. 3 days before the scheduled operational certification, Eric knocked on Marcus's office door at 2200 hours. Late enough that most of the base was asleep, early enough that insomniacs and planners were still working. Marcus looked up from the laptop where he had been reviewing the final exercise plans. Come in, Major. Eric entered, and Marcus immediately noticed he was carrying something, a wooden box, maybe 12 inches square, worn smooth by handling. He set it on the desk between them with a gentleness that suggested it contained something precious. I found this in my mother's house last month, Eric said without preamble. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. When I was going through her things, I found this box in her closet. It was my father's personal effects from Iraq, the ones they sent back after he died. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Eric, you do not have to show me this. I need to, please. Eric opened the box. Inside were the artifacts of a warrior's life. Dog tags, a folded flag, photographs, letters bound with string, and at the bottom a small leather journal cracked with age and stained with things Marcus did not want to identify. My father kept a journal, Eric said, pulling it out carefully. I did not know. He never mentioned it in his letters home, but he wrote in it almost every day, about the war, about his crew, about you. He opened the journal to a page marked with a piece of ribbon and turned it so Marcus could read. The handwriting was unmistakably Jack's, bold and flowing, the writing of a man who thought faster than his pen could move. Marcus read, February 18, 2006. Iron made another impossible shot today. T-72 at 3,200 meters through a sandstorm. Anyone else would have missed. He called it like he was ordering coffee. Target tank, fire. And boom, dead Iraqi armor. Sometimes I think he can see through walls. But what makes him special is not his shooting. It is his care. He checks on the crew 3 times a day, makes sure we eat, sleep, write letters home. He carries the weight for all of us so we can focus on fighting. That is what leaders do. They carry weight. I would follow him into hell. Actually, I am following him into hell. We are in Iraq. Same thing. Marcus had to stop reading. His vision was blurring, and he refused to cry in front of Jack's son. There are 50 pages like that, Eric said quietly. 50 pages of my father writing about how much he respected you, how much he trusted you, how you saved his life more times than he could count. And then the last entry, written the morning he died. He turned to the final page. Marcus did not want to read it, but he could not look away. March 23, 2006. Today might be the day. I can feel it in my bones, the way you can feel a storm coming before the sky changes. We are rolling into a neighborhood that stinks of ambush. Iron feels it too. I can see it in the way he moves, more careful, more deliberate. If I do not come home, I need someone to know the truth. Iron Aldridge is the best man I have ever served with, the best friend I have ever had. If something happens to me trying to keep him alive, that is not tragedy. That is privilege. I chose this life. I chose this crew. I chose this brother, and I would choose it all again. Tell Eric I love him. Tell him to be a warrior like Iron. Tell him dying for your brothers is not losing. It is winning in the only way that matters. Marcus closed his eyes, but the tears came anyway, hot tracks down his cold cheeks. 36 years of military bearing, and he could not stop them. Did not want to stop them. He knew, Marcus whispered. He knew he was going to die, and he went anyway. He chose you, Eric said, his own voice thick with emotion. He chose to die for you because you mattered it that much to him. And I spent 17 years hating you for accepting that gift. You had every right to hate me. No, I had every right to be angry, to grieve, to miss him so much it felt like dying. But I did not have the right to blame you for a choice he made freely. Eric reached across the desk, gripping Marcus's shoulder. You did not get my father killed. He got himself killed, saving someone he loved. And I am sorry it took me 17 years to understand that. Marcus looked up, meeting Eric's eyes, seeing Jack reflected there, seeing forgiveness that he had never believed he deserved. I miss him every day, Marcus said roughly. Every single day for 17 years. So do I, but I think he would want us to stop missing him and start honoring him. By being the kind of warriors he believed we could be, by protecting each other the way he protected you. Eric pulled something else from the box, a patch, the Swedish flag with a tank silhouette embroidered over it. Jack's unit patch from the Gulf War. I want you to have this, Eric said. My father wore it on every deployment. He would want you to carry it, to remember. Marcus took the patch with shaking hands. The fabric was worn soft, faded from sun and sand, and 17 years in a box. It smelled like dust and memory. Thank you, he managed, for this, for giving me a chance, for letting me train you. Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing something in me worth teaching. Eric stood, preparing to leave, then paused. Captain, one more thing. What? My father was wrong about one thing in that last journal entry. He said if something happened to him, tell me to be a warrior like you. Eric smiled, but you already did that. You showed me what it means to be a warrior, to carry weight for your crew, to do what is right even when it costs everything, to refuse to quit no matter how hard it gets. That is what you taught me. That is what he would have wanted me to learn. He snapped to attention and rendered the sharpest salute Marcus had ever received. Marcus rose and returned it, feeling the weight of history in the gesture, the connection that stretched from Jack to Eric to all the warriors who would come after them. Dismissed, Major. Eric left, closing the door softly behind him. Marcus sat alone in his office, holding Jack's unit patch, reading Jack's words, and finally, after 17 years, allowing himself to grieve not as a guilty survivor, but as a man who had lost his brother and gained a son. Outside, the snow fell gently on the frozen base, covering everything in white, erasing old wounds and making space for new growth. Chapter 10. The Storm. The cyber attack hit at 03:15 on a Thursday morning. Marcus was awake when it happened, standing a watch in the command center because old habits died hard, and he had never been able to sleep well before major operations. The certification exercise was scheduled for 0800, and somewhere in his gut, in the place where warriors learn to trust their instincts, he had felt wrongness brewing. The first sign was the lights. They flickered once, twice, then steadied. The second sign was the computers. Every screen in the command center went dark simultaneously, stayed dark for exactly 5 seconds, then rebooted with error messages cascading across displays. The third sign was the radios. Static, pure white noise on every frequency. Kowalski appeared at Marcus's elbow within 30 seconds, moving with the speed of a man who had spent 30 years responding to emergencies. We just got hit, he said flatly. Cyber attack, maybe jamming, maybe both. Marcus was already moving toward the communication station, where a young Latvian signal specialist was frantically trying to restore network connectivity. Report, Marcus demanded. Sir, all external communications are down. Satellite uplink is dead. Landlines are not responding. Radio nets are being jammed across all military frequencies. We are isolated. What about internal base communications? Functional but degraded, wired connections only. Marcus felt cold certainty settle into his bones. This was not a random technical failure. This was a deliberate, coordinated attack designed to blind and deafen NATO forces across the Baltic region, which meant something bigger was coming. He grabbed the phone, the old-fashioned landline that connected to the base operations center. It rang twice before someone picked up. Operations, Captain Lindstrom speaking. Lindstrom, this is Aldridge. What is your status? All electronic warfare indicators just lit up like Christmas, sir. Massive jamming across the board. We are tracking approximately 200 airborne contacts inbound from the east. Range 60 kilometers and closing. Speed and altitude consistent with drone swarm. 200 drones. A saturation attack designed to overwhelm missile defenses through sheer numbers. Exactly the kind of threat that gun-based systems were designed to counter. Are any missile batteries operational? Marcus asked. Negative. The cyber attack took down their targeting computers. They are trying to reboot, but estimate 15 minutes minimum before they can engage. 15 minutes. The drones would be on top of the base in less than 10. What assets do we have that can shoot back? Marcus demanded. There was a pause. Then Lindstrom's voice came back, grim but steady. 4 LVKV 9040 systems. The Swedish unit, they were not connected to the network, so the cyber attack did not affect them. But sir, they are not certified for operational use. They are still in training status. Marcus made his decision in the space between heartbeats. Certify them now. Emergency Operational Authority under NATO rules of engagement. Get Major Strand and his crews to their vehicles immediately. They are our only defense. Sir, are you sure if those crews fail? They will not fail. Move, now. He slammed down the phone and turned to Kowalski. Tank, get to the armory. Load every round of 40mm we have left into trucks and get it to the firing line. Emma, find Eric Strand and tell him he is about to get his combat baptism 3 days early. They moved without questions, without hesitation. Emma was out the door before Marcus finished the sentence. Kowalski grabbed 2 specialists and headed for the armory at a run. Marcus grabbed the base alert siren and activated it manually. The wailing filled the night, a sound designed to wake the dead and send warriors scrambling for their weapons. He ran outside into the pre-dawn darkness, his breath steaming, the cold biting at his lungs. Across the base, lights were coming on in barracks windows. Soldiers were spilling out in various states of readiness, some in full combat gear, others in whatever they had grabbed first. Marcus sprinted toward the motor pool where the LVKV systems were parked. Eric was already there, his crew mounting their vehicle with the practiced efficiency of warriors who had drilled until movement became muscle memory. The other 3 crews were seconds behind, engines starting, systems coming online. Eric saw Marcus and jumped down from his commander's hatch. What is happening? 200 drones inbound. All missile defenses are offline. You are our only gun line. Can your crews do this? Eric's face was pale in the emergency lights, but his voice was steady. We trained for this. We are ready. I know you are. Defensive positions around the ammunition depot and the airfield. Overlapping fields of fire. Prioritize threats heading for infrastructure. Let the Stinger teams handle leakers. Questions? None, sir. Then move. And Eric? Yes? Make your father proud. Eric snapped a salute, then turned and started issuing orders in Swedish, his voice carrying across the motor pool. The LVKV systems began rolling, their engines growling, their 40mm cannons elevated in tracking toward the eastern sky. Marcus climbed into a command vehicle with Kowalski and Emma, racing toward the observation post that overlooked the entire base. From there, they would be able to coordinate the defense, call targets, manage what was about to become the most important engagement these Swedish crews would ever fight. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the first hint of dawn painting the horizon in shades of gray. And against that gray, Marcus could see them now, dark shapes moving in formation, hundreds of them, a swarm of death heading directly for the base. He keyed the radio, praying it would work on short range despite the jamming. All of Kavia units, this is Aldridge. Enemy contacts bearing 090, range 12 kilometers and closing. Estimate 50 targets will enter your engagement envelope in approximately 4 minutes. Hold fire until my command. Conserve ammunition. Choose your targets carefully. This is not training. This is war. The radio crackled with acknowledgments. 4 crews, 12 warriors, 40-millimeter cannons that represented the only thing standing between 200 drones and catastrophic damage to a NATO base. Marcus had trained them as well as he knew how. He had given them skills and confidence and the knowledge that they could function when everything else failed. Now it was time to find out if that was enough. The drones came on through the dawn, and the Swedish warriors prepared to meet them with guns forged in the 1970s, and courage as old as warfare itself. Steady, Marcus transmitted. Wait for optimal range. Trust your training. Fire when ready. The world held its breath, and then the guns began to sing. Some battles are won with bullets. Others are won with the refusal to surrender. This is the story of both. Chapter 11, The Longest Hour. The first wave hit at 03:22, exactly 7 minutes after the cyber attack began. Marcus watched through thermal imaging binoculars as 50 drones materialized from the darkness, flying low and fast, their heat signatures painting the pre-dawn sky in shades of green and white. They came in a loose swarm formation, deliberately scattered to prevent a single gun from engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Whoever was controlling them knew what they were doing. All local units, weapons free, Marcus transmitted. Engage at will. Eric's gun opened fire first, the 40-millimeter autocannon making its distinctive hammering sound, a rhythm that Marcus had heard in 1,000 training exercises but never quite like this. This time the stakes were real. This time every miss meant death. The first burst caught a drone at 800 meters, the programmable round detonating precisely where Anders had calculated, creating a fragmentation cloud that shredded the target into tumbling debris. The wreckage fell like a dying bird, trailing smoke. Splash 1, Eric's voice came over the radio, steady and professional. The other 3 KV systems joined the fight, their cannons adding to the symphony of controlled violence. Tracers arced through the darkness, bright lines connecting earth to sky, hunter to prey. Drones began falling, but not fast enough. The swarm kept coming, adjusting their flight paths, spreading wider, forcing the gunners to track multiple threats simultaneously. Marcus keyed his radio. LVKV-2, you have 3 targets converging on your position from the north. Prioritize the lead drone. It is carrying the largest heat signature. 2 copies engaging. The northern gun swiveled, tracking, firing. The lead drone exploded in a spectacular fireball that told Marcus everything he needed to know. That one had been loaded with something significantly more explosive than a standard warhead, probably targeting the ammunition depot. Good kill. 2, stay alert for heavy loads. They are mixed into the swarm. Kowalski was beside him, tracking targets with his own binoculars, calling out threats as he saw them. Emma was coordinating with the Stinger teams, positioning the missile crews to catch any drones that leaked through the gun line. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos, the kind that came from years of training and the absolute refusal to panic when the world was falling apart. 5 minutes into the engagement, Marcus ran the numbers in his head. 50 drones in the first wave, 32 destroyed so far, 18 still inbound. Ammunition expenditure was higher than optimal, but acceptable given the target density. Then the second wave arrived. Contact, Emma shouted. 70-plus targets inbound from the southeast. Altitude 300 feet, speed 80 knots. Marcus swung his binoculars and felt his stomach drop. The second wave was faster, flying lower, using terrain masking to hide their approach until the last possible moment. And they were heading directly for the airfield, where 12 of 35 fighters sat parked like expensive targets waiting to burn. All units, redirect fire to southeast sector. Priority targets are fast movers heading for the airfield. Eric, take your crew in the mobile unit. Get between those drones and our aircraft. Moving now. Eric's Lvkivi broke from its static position and raced toward the airfield, its tracks throwing up frozen mud, its gun already traversing toward the new threat. The driver was good, keeping the vehicle stable, even at speed, giving Anders a platform steady enough to shoot from. They reached their new position with maybe 30 seconds to spare before the drones entered engagement range. Eric dismounted, running forward to get a better view of the approaching swarm, his rifle forgotten, his entire focus on the sky. Marcus watched through his binoculars as Eric made rapid calculations, assessing angles and speeds and the mathematics of interception. Then he was on the radio, his voice cutting through the chaos with absolute clarity. All guns, this is Strand. Stagger your fire. I want a rolling barrage, not simultaneous engagement. LVKV-1 takes lead targets. 2 takes middle. 3 takes trail. 4 stands ready for leakers. Execute. It was textbook tactics, the kind of coordination that Marcus had drilled into them for 6 weeks. And it worked beautifully. The 4 guns opened fire in sequence, their cannons creating overlapping fields of fragmentation that turned the sky into a meat grinder. Drones flew into the kill zone and disintegrated. The swarm tried to adjust, tried to find gaps in the coverage, but Eric was already calling corrections, shifting fire, closing holes before they could be exploited. LVKV-2, shift left 20 degrees. You have 3 targets clustering. 1 burst, air burst, now. The gun obeyed, firing a perfect 3-round burst that created a fragmentation pattern big enough to catch all 3 drones simultaneously. They fell together, tangled wreckage raining down on the frozen tarmac. Marcus felt something fierce and proud swell in his chest. Eric was not just following the training, he was thinking, adapting, commanding with the kind of instinctive brilliance that could not be taught. He was fighting the way Jack had fought, the way warriors fought when everything depended on being better than the enemy. The second wave broke against the Swedish gun line like water against stone. 70 targets became 50, then 30, then a handful of survivors fleeing back toward the border with Stinger missiles chasing them down. Cease fire, Eric transmitted. Second wave neutralized, ammunition status check. The reports came back quickly. Every crew was down to less than 30% of their loadout. They had maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire left before running dry. And according to the radar, the third wave was already forming up on the horizon. Marcus grabbed the landline phone connecting to the operations center. Lindstrom, status on the missile batteries? Still rebooting, sir. Estimate 5 more minutes before they are operational. 5 minutes. They needed to hold for 5 more minutes, and then the Patriots and NASAMS could take over, could bring their long-range precision to bear against targets that were still beyond the LV-Kiev engagement envelope. 5 minutes might as well have been 5 hours. Understood. Tell them to hurry. We are almost out of ammunition. He returned to the observation post where Kowalski was already calculating distances and angles, his mind working through the same math that Marcus was running. Third wave is bigger, Kowalski said flatly. Estimate 120 targets. They are going to saturate us. We cannot kill them all before we run dry. Then we kill as many as we can and trust the stingers to get the rest. And if the stingers are not enough, Marcus did not have a good answer to that question, so he did what warriors did when the situation was impossible. He kept fighting. All of Kiev units, third wave inbound. This is going to be close. Conserve ammunition. Make every round count. Fire only when you have high probability shots. We need to stretch what we have until the missile batteries come online. The acknowledgments came back, terse and professional. These warriors knew the math as well as he did. They understood that they were being asked to perform a miracle with resources that were already exhausted. But they were going to try anyway, because that was what warriors did. The third wave came at 0351. 120 drones flying in a coordinated attack pattern that showed genuine tactical sophistication. They came from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing the LV-Kiev crews to split their attention, to make impossible choices about which threats to engage and which to let through. The guns opened fire, and Marcus knew immediately that they were in trouble. Too many targets, not enough ammunition. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Eric's crew was fighting brilliantly. Anders putting rounds exactly where they needed to be. The loader feeding ammunition with machine precision. Eric coordinating fire like a conductor leading an orchestra. But brilliance had limits when you were outnumbered 60-1. Drones began leaking through the gun line. 1, 3, 7. The Stinger teams engaged, their missiles streaking into the sky, killing some of the leakers, but not all. Not nearly all. A drone slammed into the corner of a barracks building, detonating with enough force to blow out windows for 100 meters. Another hit near the fuel depot, close enough that Marcus could feel the concussion through the ground. They were losing. LVKV-1, ammunition critical, Eric transmitted, his voice strained for the first time. We are down to 15 rounds. 15 rounds against 40 targets still inbound. Marcus made a decision that he knew might haunt him for whatever remained of his life. All LVKV units, cease fire. Conserve remaining ammunition for the next wave. Sir, Eric protested, we still have targets inbound. I know, but if we shoot ourselves dry now, we will have nothing left when they come back. Stinger teams will handle the leakers. Save your ammunition." The guns fell silent. It was one of the hardest things Marcus had ever ordered, telling warriors to stop fighting when the enemy was still coming. But sometimes the tactical decision and the moral decision were not the same thing. The Stinger teams did their best. They killed 9 of the remaining leakers. But 11 drones got through, slamming into various targets across the base. Most hit non-critical infrastructure, storage buildings, vehicle parks. One hit the mess hall, which was thankfully empty at this hour. But one drone, just one, flew directly over the ammunition depot. Marcus watched it through his binoculars, watched it descend in a terminal dive, watched it strike the reinforced roof of the bunker where 40,000 tons of ordnance was stored. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded. Chapter 12, The Cost. The blast wave hit the observation post 3 seconds after detonation, slamming into the reinforced concrete bunker with enough force to crack windows and knock Marcus off his feet. He found himself on the floor with Kowalski on top of him, the sergeant major having reacted instinctively to shield his commander from flying debris. For a long moment, Marcus could not hear anything except a high-pitched ringing, could not think anything except that they had just lost the ammunition depot. 40,000 tons of explosives, gone. The logistics backbone for NATO operations in the Baltic region, destroyed. He pushed himself upright, shaking his head to clear it, and looked out through the shattered observation window. The ammunition depot was burning. Not the catastrophic detonation Marcus had feared, not the kind of explosion that would have leveled half the base, but a fierce chemical fire that sent a pillar of black smoke climbing into the dawn sky. The bunker's reinforced construction had contained most of the blast, but secondary explosions were still cooking off, sending tracers and flaming debris arcing through the air like fireworks. "Damage report," Marcus managed, his voice sounding strange and distant in his ringing ears. Emma was already on the landline, talking rapidly with the operations center. She turned to Marcus, her face pale. "Multiple structures damaged, casualty counts still coming in, but preliminary reports suggest light to moderate. The ammunition bunker is a total loss. Fire suppression teams are responding, but they are not optimistic about saving anything." Marcus felt something cold settle into his gut. The mission had been to protect the base. They had failed. Warriors were hurt, possibly dead. Critical infrastructure was destroyed, all because he had not been good enough, fast enough, smart enough to stop every single threat. "Give me a casualty list as soon as possible," he said, "and tell the fire teams I am coming to help." "Boss, you are not a firefighter," Kowalski protested. "Then I will carry water. Move." They ran together toward the burning depot, passing wounded soldiers being carried in the opposite direction by medics. The base was controlled chaos, warriors responding to a dozen different emergencies simultaneously. But there was no panic. The training held. Everyone knew their job, and they were doing it. At the depot, Marcus found Eric. The young major was helping drag unexploded ordnance away from the fire, working alongside Latvian soldiers and Swedish crews, his face black with soot, his hands bleeding from handling hot metal. He looked up as Marcus approached, and for a moment their eyes met. "I am sorry," Eric said hoarsely. "We should have shot ourselves dry. Should have killed every target." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You followed orders, made the tactical decision I asked you to make. This is on me, not you. But the depot can be rebuilt. Warriors cannot. You kept your crews alive. You protected the airfield. 12 F-35s are still operational because of your actions. That matters more than a warehouse full of explosives." Eric looked like he wanted to argue, but a secondary explosion inside the bunker interrupted, sending a gout of flame 50 feet into the air. They both ducked instinctively, feeling the heat wash over them, even at this distance. "Help me move these shells," Eric said instead, gesturing to a pallet of artillery rounds that was dangerously close to the flames. "If those cook off, they will take out everyone in a 100-meter radius." They worked together for the next 20 minutes. Marcus and Eric and Kowalski and a dozen other warriors whose names Marcus did not know but whose courage he would never forget. They moved ordnance that was hot enough to blister skin, working with the knowledge that any moment could be their last if something detonated. But nothing did. The fire teams got the blaze under control just as the sun finally rose above the horizon, painting the smoke in shades of orange and gold. The ammunition depot was a smoking ruin, but the base was saved. The casualties were surprisingly light, mostly minor injuries from flying debris, and a few more serious burns from the soldiers who had been closest to the initial blast. By 0600, the immediate crisis was over. The fires were out. The wounded were receiving treatment. The drones, all 187 of them that had been destroyed, lay scattered across the base like fallen leaves. Marcus stood at the edge of the tarmac, looking at the wreckage, feeling exhaustion settle into his bones. He was too old for this. Too old for combat that came without warning at 3 in the morning. Too old for the adrenaline and terror and bone-deep weariness that followed. But he was not too old to be proud. Eric approached, walking slowly, favoring his left leg. He had twisted something during the ammunition moving, but had kept working anyway because that was what warriors did. The missile batteries came online 10 minutes ago, Eric reported. Too late to help, but ready if there is a fourth wave. There will not be a fourth wave, Marcus said with certainty. Whoever launched this attack just lost 200 drones. That is not a probe. That is a significant percentage of their available inventory. They will need time to rearm and reassess. Do you think it was Russia? Does it matter? Could have been Russia. Could have been proxies. Could have been anyone who wants to test NATO resolve. What matters is that we held 4 gun systems against 200 drones, and we held. Eric was quiet for a moment, staring at the smoke still rising from the ammunition depot. When he spoke, his voice was soft. My father told me once that the hardest part of command is living with your decisions. Win or lose, live or die, you have to carry the weight of every choice you make. I never understood what he meant until today. Welcome to command, Marcus said. The view from here is terrible and the responsibility never ends. But it is the only job that matters. I ordered my crews to keep firing. We shot ourselves almost dry trying to kill every target, and we still failed. You did not fail. You made impossible choices with inadequate resources, and you saved this base from being overrun. That is not failure. That is victory against overwhelming odds. It does not feel like victory. It never does. Real victories are ugly and expensive and leave you wondering if you could have done better. Hollywood victories are clean and triumphant. Real ones smell like smoke and blood and regret. But you learn to carry it because someone has to. They stood together, watching the sunrise. 2 warriors marked by fire and exhaustion and the weight of command. Behind them, Kowalski was organizing the Swedish crews, getting them fed and rested, preparing for whatever came next. Emma was coordinating with NATO command, filing reports, explaining what had happened, and why 4 training systems had engaged in combat without formal authorization. The aftermath was going to be messy. There would be investigations, questions about the ammunition Marcus had acquired illegally, debates about whether he had exceeded his authority by ordering untested systems into combat. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, the base was saved and warriors were alive. That would have to be enough. Chapter 13, The Reckoning. The investigation began exactly 48 hours after the attack. Marcus sat in a conference room in Riga, facing 3 NATO officers who had flown in from Brussels specifically to determine whether he should be court-martialed or commended. The panel consisted of a German brigadier general, a British colonel, and an American lieutenant colonel from the Inspector General's office. They had spent 6 hours reviewing every decision Marcus had made, every regulation he had bent, every rule he had broken, the ammunition transfer, the emergency operational certification, the decision to hold fire during the 3rd wave. Each choice dissected and analyzed, reduced to paperwork and protocol violations. Marcus answered their questions honestly. He had nothing to hide and nothing to apologize for. He had made decisions that saved lives and protected infrastructure. If that cost him his career, so be it. Captain Aldridge, the German general said, leaning back in his chair, you understand that unauthorized transfer of military munitions between services and allied nations is a serious offense? Yes, sir. And you understand that ordering training units into combat without proper certification violates multiple NATO protocols? Yes, sir. Then why did you do it? Marcus met the general's eyes steadily. Because the alternative was watching 200 drones destroy a NATO base while our missile defenses were offline. Because sometimes the choice is between breaking rules and watching warriors die. I chose to break rules. The British colonel spoke up. You put inadequately trained crews into combat. You could have gotten them killed. Sir, with respect, those crews were not inadequately trained. They were the best trained gun crews in NATO. I know because I trained them myself. They performed flawlessly under conditions that would have broken less prepared warriors. But they failed to prevent the ammunition depot from being destroyed. Marcus felt anger flare, hot and clean. Sir, 4 gun systems engaged 200 drones with a combined ammunition loadout that should have lasted maybe 30 minutes of sustained combat. They held for over an hour. They protected critical infrastructure, including 12 F-35 aircraft worth $500 million. They kept casualty counts to single digits when they could have been in the hundreds. If you call that failure, then I question your understanding of combat operations. The room went silent. Marcus had just come dangerously close to insubordination, but he was past caring. These officers had flown in from comfortable headquarters to judge decisions made in the chaos of combat by warriors who had refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. The American lieutenant colonel cleared his throat. Captain, we have reviewed the testimony from Major Strand and his crews. They credit you with saving not just the base, but their lives. They have submitted formal commendations requesting you be recognized for your actions. Marcus blinked. Sir? Major Strand in particular was quite emphatic. He stated, and I quote, Captain Aldridge taught us to fight when the computers died and the networks failed. He gave us skills that no amount of technology could replace. Every warrior who survived that attack owes their life to his training. End quote. The German general shuffled papers, his expression softening slightly. We have also received communications from Admiral Hayes, retired. He has submitted a statement taking full responsibility for the ammunition transfer. He claims he ordered you to requisition the supplies and threatened professional consequences if you refused. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, Hayes covering for him, Eric defending him. Even from beyond the grave, Jack was still protecting him through his son. Sir, Admiral Hayes is lying to protect me. The ammunition transfer was my decision. I take full responsibility. We know, the British colonel said dryly. Admiral Hayes is a terrible liar, but his statement creates enough ambiguity that prosecution becomes complicated. Combined with the combat results and the testimony from Swedish and Latvian forces, the panel is inclined to view your actions as justifiable under emergency combat conditions. Marcus stared at them, not quite believing what he was hearing. You are not court-martialing me? We are not court-martialing you, the German general confirmed. Instead, we are issuing an official reprimand for improper munitions handling and placing a formal letter in your personnel file noting protocol violations. You will also be required to testify before a NATO logistics review board about gaps in ammunition supply chains for legacy systems. And you are being awarded the NATO Meritorious Service Medal for exceptional performance under combat conditions. Major Strand and his unit are receiving the same, along with formal operational certification for the LVKV 9040 program. Effective immediately, Swedish gun systems are authorized for deployment across the Baltic region. Marcus felt dizzy. They were not ending his career. They were validating everything he had done. There is one more thing, the American officer said. General Vance sends her regards. She also asked me to inform you that there is a position waiting for you at NATO Joint Force Command. 18-month contract, lieutenant colonel's rank. You would be responsible for integrating gun-based air defense systems across the entire eastern flank. The job he had turned down before. The job that would mean continuing to serve, continuing to matter, continuing to train warriors instead of fading into retirement. What if I want to retire? Marcus asked. Then you retire with honors and our gratitude, the German general said. But Captain, the world needs warriors like you. Men who understand that technology is a tool, not a replacement for human excellence. Men who train crews to function when everything fails. If you walk away now, that knowledge dies with you. Marcus thought about Jack, about Sarah, about Eric and Anders, and all the young warriors who would deploy to dangerous places with inadequate training because no one had bothered to teach them the old skills that still mattered. He thought about the LVKF guns singing in the darkness, about warriors refusing to quit even when the ammunition ran dry, about the kind of brotherhood that could survive 17 years of grief and blame and finally emerge stronger. I will take the position, he heard himself say, on one condition. Name it. Sergeant Major Kowalski and Captain Rossi come with me. I need people I trust, and I trust them with my life. The panel exchanged glances, then the German general nodded. Approved. You will report to NATO Joint Force Command in Brussels on the 1st of next month. Dismissed, Lieutenant Colonel Aldridge. The rank hit him like a physical blow. Lieutenant Colonel, after 36 years as a captain, they were promoting him. He stood, saluted, and walked out of the conference room in a daze. Eric was waiting in the hallway along with Kowalski and Emma. They had all been summoned to give testimony, and they had clearly been coordinating their stories to protect him. Well, Eric asked anxiously. Reprimand, medal, and a promotion, Marcus said, still not quite believing it. Apparently breaking all the rules is fine if you win. Kowalski laughed. It sounded like thunder. I could have told them that. Warriors who color inside the lines do not change anything. It is the crazy bastards who redraw the lines that matter. Did you really threaten Admiral Hayes to get him to lie for me? Marcus asked Emma. She smiled innocently. I have no idea what you are talking about, sir. I simply explained to the Admiral that his legacy would be significantly enhanced if he took credit for a brilliant logistics operation instead of letting you take sole blame for an illegal transfer. That is extortion. That is creative problem solving. Eric stepped forward, his expression serious. Captain, Colonel, whatever your rank, thank you for training us, for believing in us, for showing me who my father really was and what he stood for. You gave me more than skills. You gave me peace. Marcus pulled Eric into a hug, the kind of embrace that was half greeting and half goodbye, the acknowledgement that their time together was ending, but the bond they had forged would endure. You made your father proud, Marcus said quietly. You became the warrior he knew you could be. That is all I ever wanted. They broke apart, both men refusing to acknowledge the tears on their faces. Warriors did not cry, except when they did, and this moment deserved tears. What happens now? Eric asked. Now you deploy to Latvia with your unit. You protect convoys and airfields and all the things that need protecting. You train new crews. You pass on what you learn. And you remember that warriors are not obsolete as long as they refuse to quit. And you? I go to Brussels, train more warriors, build more gun systems, make sure that what we did here becomes doctrine instead of exception. Marcus smiled. Apparently I am not done yet. Good, Eric said firmly. The world needs more warriors like you, men who care more about doing right than looking good. Men who break rules to save lives, men like my father. Your father was better than me. Maybe, but you are trying to live up to him. That is what matters. They shook hands, a grip that lasted long enough to communicate everything words could not. Respect, gratitude, the kind of bond that only forms between warriors who have bled together. Then Eric saluted, crisp and perfect, and walked away to rejoin his crews. Chapter 14, The Legacy. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a classroom at the NATO Defense College in Rome, looking at 40 young officers from a dozen different nations. They were here to learn about integrated air defense, about the coordination between guns and missiles and electronic warfare that kept modern militaries alive. But Marcus was here to teach them something else. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Aldridge, he began. I have commanded armor for 36 years. Tanks, guns, warriors. And I am here to tell you that everything you think you know about modern warfare is incomplete. He clicked to the first slide, a photograph of the LVKV 9040, its gun elevated, its crew visible in the hatches. This is a weapons system designed in the 1970s. Old technology, obsolete by current doctrine. And last December, 4 of these systems defended a NATO base against 200 drones, while all our advanced missile systems were offline due to cyber attack. Want to know how they did it? He clicked to the next slide. Eric and Anders and their crew, soot-covered and exhausted, standing beside their gun after the battle. They did it because they were trained to fight without computers, to acquire targets with their eyes, to coordinate with hand signals when radios failed, to function as crews instead of individuals operating machines. They won because they refused to become dependent on technology that could fail. They won because they were warriors, not just technicians. He looked at the young officers, seeing skepticism on some faces, interest on others. Here is what I want you to understand. Technology is a multiplier. It makes good warriors better, but it cannot make bad warriors good. If you cannot fight when the computers die, then you cannot fight. Period. My job over the next 2 weeks is to teach you how to fight when everything fails, how to lead crews, how to build the kind of brotherhood that survives chaos, how to be warriors in an age that wants you to be button pushers. One of the students, a young German lieutenant, raised his hand. Sir, with respect, are you suggesting we abandon modern systems and return to manual targeting? No, I'm suggesting you learn both. Use the computers when they work, but train so hard on manual systems that you can switch seamlessly when technology fails. Because it will fail. In combat, everything fails. Satellites get jammed. Networks get hacked. Missiles run out. When that happens, you need to be warrior enough to keep fighting with whatever you have left. He clicked to another slide. The ammunition depot, burning. The smoke rising into the dawn sky. The visible evidence of failure and survival mixed together. We lost the ammunition depot that night. Could not save it, but we saved the base, saved the aircraft, saved the warriors. And you know why? Because the crews I trained understood that perfect is the enemy of good enough. They knew they could not stop every threat, so they stopped the threats that mattered most and accepted the losses they could afford. That is command. That is war. You do your best with what you have, and you live with the results. The classroom was completely silent. These young officers were probably used to instructors who taught tactics and procedures in the clean mathematics of warfare as imagined by planners who had never heard incoming fire. Marcus was giving them something different. The truth. Ugly and honest and absolutely necessary. Over the next 2 weeks, you are going to learn gun systems, manual targeting, crew coordination. You are going to train until you can acquire and engage targets with your eyes closed. Some of you will hate it. Some of you will think it is a waste of time. But 5 years from now, when you are deployed and your fancy targeting computer gets hit by shrapnel and dies, you will remember this course. You will remember that you can still fight, and maybe that memory will keep you alive. He paused, looking at them one by one. Questions? A French captain raised her hand. Sir, we have read the reports from Latvia. You violated multiple regulations to achieve that result. How do we know when to break rules? Marcus smiled. That is the right question. Here is my answer. Rules exist to create order and prevent chaos. They are important, but they are not sacred. When you are in command and you have to choose between following a rule and saving a life, you save the life every time. And if that costs you your career, then at least you go home knowing you did the right thing. But how do we know what is right? You ask yourself a simple question. If your son or daughter or the warrior you love most was in danger, what would you do? Would you follow the regulation, or would you do whatever it took to keep them alive? When the answer to those questions is different, the rule is wrong. Trust your conscience more than your manual. Another student spoke up. Sir, the reports mention a Major Eric Strand, Swedish officer. The file says he specifically requested you as instructor, despite some kind of personal history. Can you explain that? Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the ghost of Jack settling on his shoulders. Major Strand's father saved my life in Iraq by sacrificing his own. Major Strand spent 17 years blaming me for his father's death. He had good reason, and when I was assigned to train him, we had to face that history, had to decide whether we were going to let grief poison everything or whether we were going to honor his father by doing the work that mattered. What did you choose? We chose to honor him by training hard, by trusting each other, by refusing to let the past destroy the future. And in the process, we both healed from wounds that had been festering for too long. He clicked to the final slide, a photograph taken 3 weeks ago. Marcus and Eric standing together at Jack's grave in Sweden, both men in dress uniform, both men finally at peace. That is Major Strand and myself visiting his father's memorial. We go every year now, together, to remember a warrior who taught us both what matters: brotherhood, duty, the refusal to quit even when quitting would be easier. He looked at the young officers. That is what I am here to teach you, not just how to shoot guns or coordinate fire, but how to be warriors worth following, how to build crews that trust each other absolutely, how to carry the weight of command without being crushed by it, how to honor the warriors who came before you by being worthy of their sacrifice. The classroom remained silent. Then the German lieutenant who had asked the first question stood, came to attention, and saluted. One by one, the other students followed, 40 young officers rising to salute a teacher who had just shown them what it meant to be more than a soldier. Marcus returned the salute, feeling Jack's ghost smile, and finally rest. Chapter 15, Iron Endures. Fort Benning, Georgia, 2 years later. Marcus stood at the edge of the tank range, watching young lieutenants run through gunnery drills on M1 Abrams tanks. The familiar sound of main guns firing echoed across the range, each shot a controlled detonation of mathematics and violence. He was 60 years old now, 2 years past his original retirement date, 2 years into his new role as senior advisor for NATO ground-based air defense. He had trained hundreds of crews across a dozen nations, written doctrine that was now being taught at military academies, turned the hard lessons of Latvia into institutional knowledge that would outlive him. And he was tired, good tired. The exhaustion that came from work that mattered, from days filled with purpose instead of empty hours waiting for death. But tired nonetheless. His phone buzzed, a message from Eric. Helena had the baby this morning. Boy, 8 pounds. We named him Jack Marcus. Thought you should know. Marcus stared at the message, feeling something break open in his chest. Jack Marcus Strand, a name that carried the weight of history and the promise of future. A name that connected 3 generations of warriors through bonds of blood and choice. He typed back quickly, "Congratulations. Your father would be so proud. I am proud. Welcome to fatherhood, Major." The response came seconds later. "Thank you, Iron, for everything. Come visit when you can. Jack Marcus should know his uncle." Uncle. Marcus turned the word over in his mind, tasting it, feeling its weight. He had lost a brother 17 years ago, lost a wife 3 years after that, had spent years believing he was alone in the world, that all the people who mattered were ghosts. But he had been wrong. Eric had given him family again, not by blood, but by the choice that mattered more, the decision to forgive, to heal, to build something instead of dwelling in ruins. Another message arrived, this one from Kowalski. "Boss, you seeing this?" Attached was a news article. Swedish Defense Ministry announces expansion of VKV program. 20 new systems being delivered to Poland, Lithuania, Estonia. Gun-based air defense experiencing renaissance across NATO. Marcus smiled. They had done it. 4 warriors and 4 guns in the darkness, holding the line when everything else failed, had changed the conversation, had reminded the world that sometimes the old ways still worked, that warriors mattered more than machines, that refusing to quit was its own kind of victory. Emma found him standing at the range, staring at his phone with an expression she could not quite read. "Sir, you okay?" "Better than okay, Captain. Eric just had a son, named him after Jack." Emma smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "That is beautiful. Are you going to visit?" "Eventually, after we finish this training cycle." He looked at her. "How are the new instructors working out?" "Good. They are learning. Takes time to teach someone how to train warriors instead of just running them through drills. But they are getting there. You will be a good commander someday, Emma. You have the gift. You care more about warriors than you do about looking good. That is rare. I learned from the best." They stood together watching the tanks fire. 2 warriors at different stages of their journeys, but bound by the same commitment to excellence, the same refusal to accept good enough when great was possible. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked. "Taking the Latvia mission, breaking the rules, almost ending your career?" Marcus thought about it honestly. Thought about the ammunition depot burning, the investigation, the fear that he had destroyed everything he had built over 36 years of service. Then he thought about Eric, healed and whole, holding his newborn son. Thought about the crews he had trained going on to train others, spreading the knowledge like seeds that would grow into forests. Thought about doctrine changing because 4 guns had held the line when nothing else could. "No," he said simply. "I regret nothing. We did what was right, saved who we could, honored the warriors who came before us. That is enough." "What happens when you finally do retire? For real this time?" "I teach, somewhere, somehow. Pass on what I know before it dies with me. Maybe write a book. The Gunner's Manual for Warriors Who Refuse to Quit. Terrible title, but honest." Emma laughed. "I would read that book." "You already lived it." A young lieutenant approached, saluting crisply. "Sir, your next class is assembled. 40 officers waiting for instruction on manual targeting procedures." Marcus nodded. "Tell them I will be there in 5 minutes." The lieutenant left. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the Georgia sun on his face, hearing the guns fire, smelling the cordite and diesel, and all the familiar sense of a life spent in service to something larger than himself. Jack had died, giving him a gift. Time. Years that should have been Jack's, but became Marcus's through sacrifice. For a long time, Marcus had not known what to do with that gift. Had carried it like a burden, the weight of survivor's guilt crushing him slowly. But somewhere between Latvia and here, between training Eric and watching him heal, Marcus had figured it out. The gift was not time, it was purpose. Jack had given him the chance to matter, to keep fighting, to refuse to quit until the work was done. And the work was never done. There would always be warriors who needed training, crews who needed building, young officers who needed to learn that technology was a tool, but humanity was the weapon. Marcus Aldridge, iron, 60 years old and too stubborn to stop, turned and walked toward the classroom, toward 40 young warriors waiting to learn, toward a future where the lessons of the past would keep people alive. Behind him, the guns kept firing, the eternal rhythm of warriors preparing for wars they hoped would never come. The sound of readiness, the sound of vigilance, the sound of iron enduring. Epilogue, the passing. 10 years later, Marcus Aldridge died the way warriors hoped to die. Not in some dramatic battle, not with glory and speeches, but quietly, in his sleep, in a small house in Virginia, having lived long enough to see his work outlive him. The funeral was held at Arlington National Cemetery on a cold January morning. Hundreds of warriors attended, officers and enlisted, American and Swedish and German and Polish, old and young. Warriors he had trained personally and warriors who had been trained by warriors he had trained, the ripples of his influence spreading through generations. Eric Strand delivered the eulogy, his son Jack Marcus, now 10 years old, standing beside him in a small suit that made him look like a miniature version of his grandfather. Marcus Aldridge taught me many things, Eric said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. How to shoot, how to lead, how to function when everything fails. But the most important thing he taught me was this: warriors are not obsolete, ever. As long as there are people willing to stand between the innocent and the threats that would destroy them, warriors will matter. Marcus understood that, lived it, taught it to everyone he met. He paused, his hand on his son's shoulder. My father died saving Marcus's life. Marcus spent the next 30 years honoring that sacrifice by saving the lives of countless others, by training warriors who trained warriors, by refusing to let the old skills die just because new technology arrived, by being always a man who cared more about doing right than being right. Eric looked at the flag-draped coffin. Thank you, Iron, for giving my father's death meaning, for giving me peace, for showing the world that sometimes the answer to modern problems is ancient wisdom. Warriors, crews, brotherhood, the refusal to quit. He saluted, crisp and perfect. Every warrior in attendance followed, hundreds of hands rising in unified tribute to a teacher, a leader, a stubborn old tanker who had changed the world by refusing to accept that the old ways were dead. Later, after the burial, after the reception, Eric and young Jack Marcus stood alone at the grave. The boy had been quiet all day, processing grief he was too young to fully understand. Did you know him well? Jack Marcus asked. Uncle Marcus? Very well. He was one of the best men I ever knew. He saved my life, saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. And he did it all because he believed warriors matter. What is a warrior? Eric knelt down, looking his son in the eyes, the same ice blue eyes that Jack Strand Sr. had passed down through generations. A warrior is someone who stands up when everyone else sits down, who fights when fighting is hard, who protects people even when it costs everything. Your grandfather was a warrior. Uncle Marcus was a warrior. And someday, if you choose, you can be a warrior too. Will you teach me? I will teach you everything Uncle Marcus taught me. How to be strong without being cruel. How to lead without arrogance. How to carry the weight that leaders must carry. Eric smiled. And I will teach you to shoot. Manual targeting. No computers. Just eyes and hands and the skills that endure. Young Jack Marcus looked at the headstone reading the inscription. Marcus Aldridge, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army. He taught warriors to fight when everything failed. I want to be like him, the boy said. Then we will start your training tomorrow. Just like he would have wanted. They walked away together, grandfather's grandson and the man who had become family through choice rather than blood, leaving flowers on the grave of a warrior who had finally earned his rest. Behind them, the wind stirred the flag on Marcus's grave, stars and stripes snapping in the winter air, the eternal symbol of service, duty, sacrifice. And in the distance, barely audible, the sound of guns firing on the range, young warriors training, learning skills that would keep them alive, carrying forward the lessons that Marcus had spent a lifetime teaching. Iron endures, not in the metal of guns or the armor of tanks, but in the hearts of warriors who refuse to quit, who choose brotherhood over ego, who stand between the innocent and the darkness, who remember that being obsolete is a choice, not a destiny. The guns kept firing, the warriors kept training, the lessons kept spreading. And somewhere in whatever place dead warriors go, Marcus Aldridge smiled. His work was done, but the legacy endured. Forever.